Morning, Glory America, though there's not much glorious about it. The Indianapolis Star Tribune reporting this morning that 8 are dead, more are injured at the FedEx facility near the airport. 8 people were killed during a mass shooting there late Thursday, according to the Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department spokesperson Jeannie Cook. Victims were found dead at the scene, including the gunman believed to have been a suicide. Few other details are available. 4 other people transported in ambulance. One is in critical condition with gunshot wounds. So prayers for that person, the victims, their families. At the same time, Derek Chauvin did not take the stand in his trial in Minneapolis. The defense rested. They have the day off there, and final closing arguments and jury deliberations begin Monday. Protests went on over the death of Daunte Wright in Brooklyn Center. Last night they were peaceful and were not dispersed. It's the 5th night of demonstrations, but it was the first peaceful night. And also the film of Adam Toledo, I think it's pronounced Toledo, it might be Toledo. I haven't heard it pronounced yet, was released yesterday. The Chicago police shooting of a 13-year-old boy. Some are characterizing it as having his hands up. Others are characterizing as threatening to the officer involved. I don't know. I can't judge the video that well. But it was just a bad day to open up with headlines like that. Also in the headlines, the Chinese economy grew more than 18% in the first quarter. They've had just a great year in China after unleashing the virus on the rest of the world. I know there is no theory that it was intentional. There's a theory that it was an accidental release from the lab. There are other theories, but it definitely came from Wuhan. And a year later, their economy is 18% year-over-year growth. 18%. The rest of the world is reeling. In fact, Japan announced yesterday they may have to cancel the Olympics this summer as they had 4,000 new cases. And I was up in the middle of the night reading this book, Joby Warwick's Red Line. Joby's been on a couple of times. I think he's the best pure reporter in the world for complex war-related conflict stories, international. This is about Syria and its unraveling and America's race to destroy their chemical weapons. And I mean, they have tons and tons of sarin gas and VX nerve agent, and it's riveting. I actually woke up at 2 o'clock this morning, having gone to bed hours before, just thinking, I got to read one more chapter of that. It's so riveting. And you know what it all grows out of? It grows out of President Obama laying down a red line and not enforcing it. You have to enforce your red lines. We have a red line around Taiwan, and we ought to make it express that we will enforce. That was my subject in a column in the Washington Post yesterday, which drew very few comments relative, because it's not something about which the trolls, the Democratic Party trolls, get upset. I mean, some of the Chinese Communist Party trolls got upset. But I want you to hear it, and I want you to start thinking about it, because as I read Red Line, the bottom line for this president and future presidents is decisive action at the moment of crisis. You cannot twiddle your thumbs and hold meetings like President Obama did and then decide it's too complex and you can't act, because millions die as a result and chemical weapons get used. And we can't twiddle our thumbs. Joe Biden can't twiddle his thumbs on China. There is no way, as Japan considers closing off the Olympics next summer. I mean, this summer. The games are supposed to begin in months, and they may have to cancel. That Beijing ought to get the Winter Games. They've poisoned the world. They've killed millions because of their negligence. At a minimum, reckless indifference, possibly cold calculation after negligence. That, if the world suffers and we don't, maybe that's not such a bad deal for a communist regime. My column yesterday reads, we live in dangerous times, not only because of the pandemic, but also because of the threat of military aggression from the nation from which the virus sprang, and the Communist Party that covered up the lethal nature of the disease. And boy, did they cover it up. Reasonable people disagree on when the People's Republic of China and its leader Xi Jinping will move militarily against Taiwan, the democratic island nation 100 miles from the coast of the Chinese mainland. Some, like retired Admiral James Stavridis, believe that the lurch against Taiwan is a few years off. Others, like China hawk Senator Tom Cotton, believe it may follow China's Winter Olympics in early 2022. That's if they are not moved. I have Senator Rick Scott on later today to talk about that. Just as Vladimir Putin's annexation of Crimea followed the Sochi Games of 2014. But whenever the attack on Taiwan takes place, aggression against Taiwan will pose the same dilemma to the West as Hitler's militarization of the Rhineland posed to allies in 1936. Western democracies blinked 85 years ago, and war engulfed the world shortly thereafter. Threat followed threat, demand followed demand, and the policy of appeasement of Germany failed. What happened next was a catastrophe, of course, World War II, 65 million dead. China's aggression has stepped up of late. Chinese aircraft have been testing Taiwan's air defenses for weeks. The next step is possibly an encounter at sea or a move against Taiwan's outer islands. Whatever the escalation, the United States and its allies will sooner or later face a sudden, inescapable choice: defend Taiwan or acquiesce. Just as Barack Obama faced a sudden, inescapable choice in Syria and he blinked. The United States is bound by a combination of the Taiwan Relations Act and presidential statements to defend Taiwan. But no one really knows what that means anymore. It should mean deploying U.S. troops and weaponry to assist Taipei in repelling any takeover attempt, meeting force with force. It also means working with allies now to form a visible and resolute coalition against Beijing's aggression across the Taiwan Strait and throughout the free seas of the region. Economic sanctions will not work, not against determined opponents of any sort, but especially not against Xi and his communist hardline allies in the PRC. Beijing has stepped up its rhetoric, too. Team Biden discovered that last month when Secretary of State Anthony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan endured a 16-minute tongue lashing by China's top diplomat at their Anchorage summit. Chinese Communist Party Foreign Affairs Chief Yang Jiexi's harangue followed a less aggressive statement from Blinken, about 2 minutes long, mentioning a half dozen U.S. objections to Chinese foreign and domestic policy. But Yang blistered the U.S. delegation with a broadside in response, publicly telling the world that days of Americans speaking to China in imperious tones were over. After Yang first knocked the United States for its own alleged human rights problems, he took off. Quote here, quote, "I think the problem is that the United States has exercised long-arm jurisdiction and suppression and overstretched the national security through the use of force or financial hegemony," Yang said, "and has created obstacles for normal trade activities, and the United States has also been persuading some countries to launch attacks on China." It's ridiculous. Upon returning to D.C., the chastened U.S. team commenced shadowboxing. A U.S. official suggested to reporters that the United States might boycott the 2022 games. Then the State Department and the White House clarified quickly that's not being discussed. Now President Biden is sending an unofficial delegation to Taiwan of former officials, former Senator Chris Dodd, two former Deputy Secretaries of State, Richard Armitage, I have no idea why we're sending that guy, and James Steinberg. This is a tremulous message from a confused administration. While every American president, including the last one, embraced strategic ambiguity, some, like President Donald Trump, sent far more direct messages through administration figures. Trump had a series of speeches delivered by Mike Pence, the Vice President, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien, Attorney General Barr, FBI Director Wray. All those messages were of a whole concerning a free Taiwan and getting tough on the Chinese communists. The United States now must wholly jettison the remnants of ambiguity after Yang's throwdown. The Biden administration has begun its relationship with Beijing on its back foot, I wrote, and needs to step up and do it soon. Amid these developments, the first budget from Biden actually cut defense spending in real terms. They tell you they raised it. No, they didn't, not in real terms. At a minimum, Congress must boost the Navy's top-line spending significantly if deterrence is going to hold. Having just spent $2 trillion on stimulus, it's absurd to call it COVID relief. They now want to spend trillions more on infrastructure, but nothing on defense. They ought to expand shipyards, build and repair submarines, new class of frigates more quickly, more money to modernize the naval leg of the nuclear triad. This confrontation can't be avoided, and it's up to Biden to very clearly communicate that the United States will meet force with force. It's a time for clarity. Its absence sends every signal the Chinese Communist Party needs. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll update you on more news of the morning when I return to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Here we go.
Breaking now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Vice President Kamala Harris will travel to Guatemala and Mexico in her role in tackling the root causes of the migration crisis we're facing at our southern border. I'm not kidding you. Kamala Harris made an announcement. She was asked by reporters at a roundtable discussion about whether she's going to visit the border itself. She didn't answer. Then she said her job is to focus on the root cause of the migration problem and that she will be traveling to Mexico and Guatemala soon. She will be involved, according to the White House, in high-level diplomatic work. Yeah, it's diplomatic work, all right. She's going to go to Guadalajara to try to deal with our immigration problem. Great. We're in great hands. Senator John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, had a suggestion about infrastructure, since we're paying just pennies on the dollar for infrastructure. He had a kind of a novel idea. Senator Thune has a suggestion about how we can spend some of that infrastructure money.
And now they've got this humanitarian crisis, national security crisis down there, which is desperately in need of a solution. One of the things they could do, there's been a lot of talk about infrastructure. The administration is talking about infrastructure bill. One important piece of infrastructure is to finish building the border wall.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Al is in Richmond, California. Al, you're on The Larry Elder Show. Thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it.
My theory is that my thought pattern is don't let an officer be the arresting officer, the judge, the jury, and the executioner. It's unfortunate. I've had these talks with young men before, and don't let that happen to you. And in reality, you don't have to follow a directive from a cop if you don't feel safe.
Oh, yes, you do. Give me an example. Give me an example of when you don't feel safe and you can refuse an order, a lawful order from an officer.
Okay. First of all, they don't order. They give you a directive. If I'm sitting in my car and I haven't done
semantics, Al. Semantics.
No, it's not semantics. If I feel safe in my car, the cop is rude, I don't want to confront this guy. Give me a supervisor.
If a cop has a justifiable reason to stop you and probable cause to ask you certain questions, you do not have a right to refuse.
Well, how do you know it's a lawful order?
You see, Al, your attitude is exactly why these black kids are doing what they're doing. Here you are, a grown man who knows better. I'm sorry, we're not going to talk over each other. Here you are, a grown man who knows better, telling people, no, unless you feel you haven't done anything wrong, you don't have to listen to them. What do you mean if you feel you haven't done anything wrong? Officer pulls you over. You can say, officer, what have I done? It depends on the policy of the department as to whether or not the officer is going to respond to you. But you do not have a right to demand these kinds of things. You don't. And this is why people are getting killed. Tell young people people to comply. Sort out any other thing.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, and I'm back in my own lean-to today, not at Castle Gorka. And that's because, well, Dwayne, own up to it. Dwayne's fault. Never mind, I'll tell him. As I was doing the rundown on the studio yesterday morning, Dwayne pulled the plug and made me drive the 6 hours to Castle Gorka in the morning. Windy and rainy and everything like that. And it's, I was just doing
by the way. Pulled what plug did I?
I was talking about the fact I was doing troubleshooting and you panicked and said I had to leave.
Which plug
I'm about to tell them. Before I did the troubleshooting on the exterior of the studio building, which is what I should have done because another megalopolis, not named Xfinity, had been to the studio the day before to investigate installing a fiber optic line.
Yes.
And that person had unplugged the Xfinity line. Just unplugged it. It was unplugged. The studio was unplugged outside. So I would have eventually gotten that. That's the last thing to check on the studio because it's troubleshooting is indoors typically when I have to repair stuff. And I'm going through methodically, being the professional that I am technically. And Dwayne throws a fit and says, "Get out of there. You got to get going to Castle Gorka," and sends me a map to Castle Gorka, which changes every day how to get there. The approaches are every. Did we get a laugh from Ben out of that? Was that he doesn't know the security measures involved. And so the convoy got underway, and the vast team of the Hewitt production staff got on the road to Castle Gorka, only to discover upon return to the lean-to by the river. I have a little shed. Gallagher has this Trump Tower Plaza kind of thing. And
Gallagher has like 15 studios.
15 studios.
He's got like a studio in every state almost.
Each one of them is bigger than Castle Gorka. Now, Castle Gorka is pretty impressive. And Larry Elder, I'm told, I have not been to Larry's palatial digs, has the same sort of thing. I don't know what Charlie Kirk is running in Phoenix. I think he took over the Biltmore, but I'm not sure about that. And, of course, Prager University is this vast electronic hologram place. I got this little lean-to shed by the Potomac. Really, it's just made of wood and some
little
particle
stucco,
board.
Little stucco
particle board. And I put it together myself, and I maintain it. But if big mega company comes and unplugs it on the outside,
it's my fault.
Dwayne should have let me run the check, but it wasn't Xfinity. I have to tell everyone it was the other mega company. I don't think they did it intentionally, by the way. I don't want to blame them for that. Let me, though, tell you, now that I'm back in my own little lean-to, as you can see, if you're watching on YouTube, I'm back in my humble abode. It's a nice-looking place, isn't it? The Chinese economy, as I said, grew 18.3%. Now, the good news is U.S. economy ramps up on spending surge, hiring gain. I said, what do you mean? That's the Wall Street Journal headline. The New York Times, Midtown has been empty, but other retail zones have bounced back. And I don't know there are other retail zones in Manhattan. There's basically Midtown and Fifth Avenue, but I don't know what else they're talking about. 125th Street, where I used to live. I lived at 110th and Broadway. And 125th has bounced back. Bronx, Fordham Road is cooking. They've got stuff happening at the Fulton Mall in Brooklyn. In Queens, the Main Street in Flushing is going great guns, and so they're trying to pretend like New York isn't flat on its back and won't ever get back because of de Blasio and Cuomo. But the U.S. economy is ramping up everywhere as the stimulus money, it's just basically the inflation push, floods in. And that's why I bring up Birch Gold right now, which you can find at hughgold.com or by texting my name, Hugh, to 474747. Overseas this morning, everything is positive, and that's because everyone looked at those China numbers and said, wowzer. England is up 0.75%, Germany 1%, France 0.4%. The 10-year Treasury dropped to 1.53%, and gold, of course, surged a little bit to 1767. If you're going to buy gold now. HughGold.com. Text my name, Hugh, to 474747, or roll over a portion of your IRA or 401k into physical precious metals. I suggest 10%. Get the information from Birch Gold at HughGold.com, or text Hugh to 474747. Come right back. It's Friday. Sonny Bunch is here to cheer us up, sorta. Stand by.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
And how hard was it for 3 vaccines to be created in less than a calendar year? Could you give us some of the inside story? How hard was it to get the U.S. government with the corporations to create that historic success?
Well, it was very hard. We had an FDA that takes a long time to approve things, as you know. You had Fauci saying it's going to take 3 years, maybe much longer. Most people thought you couldn't do it in 5 years. Most people thought you'd never even get a vaccine. I felt confident. And we did something else. We spent billions of dollars on manufacturing the vaccine before we even knew if it was going to work. It was a calculated risk. And if we didn't do that, you wouldn't have had it for 9 months after the date that they announced, which, as you know, because of what I did with drug prices, with the favored nations clause, that's going to be the biggest thing ever, assuming Biden keeps it, for drug prices. The drug companies aren't exactly in love with me, and they announced it 2 days after. I think everyone knew we were right there, but they announced it 2 days after. Now, supposing they announced it before, though, Sebastian,
right,
the press would have played it down. So if they announced it before, they would have acted like no big deal. When they announced it after, they made a big deal out of it. But between the FDA, who we pushed at a level that they've never been pushed before. So we got the vaccine done in less than 9 months, and it would have taken 3 to 5 years. I don't think they ever would have had it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
And so while their TV network ratings are cratering, their web traffic remains rather substantial. Therefore, this revelation is not insignificant. And guess what? This guy's the technical director. This guy oversees a lot of the digital operations. In Cut 50, James O'Keefe describes to Sean Hannity what Project Veritas has released. I've never seen James O'Keefe wear a tie. It's really interesting. Good for him. Play tape.
You saw the tapes. He's admitting the network is propaganda. He says they were trying to get Trump out without admitting that's what they were doing. You saw me confront him about that. I just want them to be honest. He's not being honest. They're deceiving. And he says that they're helping Biden. They're painting Biden in order to help him with his aviator shades. So this is an extraordinary admission. It's the #2 trending story globally on Twitter, which is ironic because Jack Dorsey banned Project Veritas from Twitter, yet our stories trend on Twitter. That means the truth is getting out there no matter what.
And so CNN is the 85th most trafficked, it is Alexa, I was right, website in global internet engagement, most trafficked site. And our 240, and Alexa, I'm sorry, Fox, I'm getting so much information here. Fox is 246. Is that right? Am I reading that right, Connor? So CNN is a top 100 website. So don't underestimate the value of CNN. The cable network is a waste of time. No one watches that. It's a very unserious network. Their digital dominance is a very real thing. It is. Therefore, what James O'Keefe is revealing needs to be taken seriously. So my point is, look at CNN more holistically outside of just Jake Tapper and Wolf Blitzer and Fredo. That's not the entirety of their influence.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
Burbank is a particularly despicably run city. Their commitment to freedom is an embarrassment. They're the ones I condemned years ago, as I explained earlier. You can't smoke a cigar in a cigar shop in Burbank. Health über alles. It is a form of health fascism, which I've said health uber alles, right? Health above all. Power to the restaurant was shut off March 13th after the city received permission from an L.A. County Superior Court judge to do so. The judges it doesn't matter. There's no recourse. Nobody values freedom. They only value what the health authorities say. It's an amazing thing. These people go to college and graduate school and then question nothing. Oh, the health authorities. That's it. That's all you have to say, health authorities. How about if I think I'll die, I won't go into Tin Horn Flats? How's that? Why is that not an option? Oh, because then I'll give it to others. Well, then you can't have anything. No place can be open, which is what they wanted and did. Dr. Fauci can't explain why the Texas numbers are not going up. Remember, he warned against that. Texas opened up. Gee, they're not dropping dead like flies.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Sonny Bunch, how are you, my friend? From the man who is co-host of Across the Movie Aisle, a podcast you must not miss. I'm glad to have back the official movie critic of the Hugh Hewitt Show. How are you, Sonny?
I'm good, Hugh. You got it right. Across the movie aisle.
I know it takes a while, but I'm a slow learner. I have a recommendation and a question before I turn you loose, and a lament. The lament is that the Potomac Yard movie theater is being closed and redeveloped into Virginia Tech campus. The recommendation is that you read at least the first 200 pages of Karen Tumulty's book about Ronald Reagan and Nancy Reagan, called The Triumph of Nancy Reagan, because it's so doggone Hollywood. It's so much fun. And then the question, I have a viewing question: Billions or Succession? That's my choice between the next thing that I watch on streaming, which I have not watched either. What should I do, Billions or Succession?
Sure. So, first off, the Potomac Yards news, I had heard, and it's a little bit sad because I'm always sad to hear when theaters are closing, except for the fact that the Potomac Yards, I don't know if you've ever been to the Potomac
Yards. It's a horrible
theater.
place, but it was close enough for me to get to.
I mean, it's a real pit.
Yeah.
So, that's not the end of the world as far as movie theaters being closed goes. I still need to read Karen Tumulty's book, and I should definitely do that because, as you mentioned, there's a very strong Hollywood component. Billions versus Succession is an interesting question because I only watched the first episode of Succession, a show that I had heard really good things about because my wife was not into it at all. And I have found that I can only really afford to watch an entire television show if my wife is also into it, because it's,
this is true. This is true.
So she wasn't that into it. I guess I'd have to say Billions then, though I haven't watched Billions either because I don't have Showtime, which is what it's on.
You're not really much of a help on this question then.
Yeah,
so you've seen 1 hour of both shows and you're not going to see either of them.
I would suggest Succession, I think, just because there's less of it. It's shorter. My understanding is it's pretty funny too, but I don't know. If I were to choose one to watch by myself, it would be Succession. But again, I don't really have that.
Well, I caught up on Mandalorian, and while I am the Mandalorian of the radio, I was not impressed with season 2, and I'm glad it's over.
You didn't like season 2? See, I liked season 2. I thought it was really. I found it very entertaining. Just the way it was structured as kind of like the A-Team in Star Wars, where the guy is going town to town and righting wrongs, and there's a little
predictable. The last. I'm not giving no spoilers. Not here, not now, not ever. But the last hour was great, and the rest of it mediocre. So, what are you talking about this week, Sonny?
Well, we got a lot of stuff to talk about. I mean, there's a horror movie that you're probably not going to like, but I
not going to go
briefly.
Go ahead.
It is in theaters, so that's one reason I want to mention it. But it's called In the Earth. It's by this guy, this director named Ben Wheatley. And the way I would describe it is the first great horror movie of the pandemic. It's set in Great Britain. It's about a guy who is going to study some phenomenon in the woods. But it takes place in the midst of a pandemic. It's not about COVID. They don't say, oh, COVID, blah, blah. But, he goes through all of these quarantine and lockdown protocols, right? He's getting sprayed down with misty decontamination, formulas, and he's giving blood tests, and then they're doing nasal swabs, et cetera, et cetera. And it's very much about the idea of purity in the forest and in nature, as opposed to, the contamination of the cities and all that. Except nature isn't really pure either. Nature has its own forms of wickedness and debasement and defilement. It is a very rough movie to watch in certain places. I would not recommend it for the weak of stomach or weak of heart. But it is an interesting little bit of elevated horror, as they like to call it, the genre of horror that is, a little fancier than slasher.
As I like to say, Sonny, not going to do it, wouldn't be prudent, not a chance. But anyway, you rank it highly among these kinds of movies.
I enjoed it. I enjoyed it for sure. It's definitely art housey, and it's a little bit artsy fartsy. I would say there's a lot of kind of weird editing. And
I was hoping you were going to tell me whether I should see Judas and the Black Messiah.
I've seen that. I mean, it was on HBO Max for a while. I don't think it still is. I think it's
in theaters now. Yep.
So Judas and the Black Messiah is it's a movie about Fred Hampton and the FBI informant who betrayed him, the so-called the titular Judas and Black Messiahs. I didn't love it. But I did like it. I mean, I think Daniel Kaluuya is very, very good as Fred Hampton, and I liked Lakeith Stanfield as the guy who betrays him. So I don't know that it's great or anything, but it's entertaining enough. It is one of the Best Picture nominees. So if you want to see,
that's why I'm going to go see it.
Nominees, you should check it out.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the best movie of the year for sure, and of the nominees. Of the nominated films, again, the one that I liked the most was The Father, which I talked about last week.
Can't find that anywhere near me. Can't find The Father. I'd go see it. I like Anthony Hopkins a lot.
Yeah, it was only playing in one theater near me, and that theater was like 20 miles from me, so it wasn't even that near. But it is on demand. So if you want to watch it on TV at home, you can do it that way.
What else you got for us? I mean, it's the weekend, Sonny.
All right, so I have a Netflix recommendation, a minor Netflix recommendation. This isn't a movie or a show that I loved, but it was entertaining enough. It was fine. I was able to watch it and enjoy it. It's called This Is a Robbery: The World's Greatest Art Heist, and it is about the 1990 theft of 13 classic works of art at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. It's a real story.
Yeah, I know this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a real story. It's about, so one night in 1990, two guys dressed up as cops broke into the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, stuck up the guards, locked them down in the basement, and then made off with 13 paintings, including a Rembrandt, a priceless Rembrandt, his only seascape, Jesus on the Sea of Galilee, or Christ on the Sea of Galilee. I forget what exactly it was called. But and a bunch of other, rare art that was part of the collection there. The show is 4 episodes long. Each episode's about 45, 50 minutes. Which means that, like every other Netflix thing, it's probably about 45 or 50 minutes too long. It could have been trimmed down in places, but it's got an interesting cast of characters. Like there's this one guy, this art thief, who lived in Boston, who swears he had nothing to do with the robbery and was actually in prison at the time of the robbery. But the show seems to think he deserves to be a serious suspect or, kind of a liaison with the Italian mob. I mean, this is the big thesis of this program is that it was either the Irish mob or the Italian mob, and the Irish mob seems not to really have had anything to do with it, and the Italian mob comes in for most of the scrutiny. So,
well, I like this idea. It's on my list below the Chicago 7 for Netflix stuff. I haven't watched that one yet either.
It's fine. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's the greatest show I've ever seen. Again, it's a little bit long. It drags out in places. It runs down some blind alleys. Like all of these things, it's just a little bit too long. But it's fine. It's entertaining, and if you're looking to kill some time this weekend, you could do worse than watching that for sure.
All right. I don't know if it's going to rain in Virginia. It seems like it's rained every day since I got back. So I'm back my lean-to is flooded and it's terrible. The studio's swampy, but
yeah. Well, it's raining here in Dallas too. Interestingly,
did you ever move to Austin for even like a cup of coffee?
I have been to Austin. I didn't move to Austin. No.
I was just reading a real estate story about Austin, and it's the craziest housing market in America right now for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's like San Francisco at the height of the tech boom right now, because everybody's trying to move from San Francisco to Austin.
Or Nashville or Alexandria. You like Dallas? Yeah. Dallas is booming too. So you got time for one more recommendation or just,
one more recommendation? Yes. Absolutely. So Mythic Quest, which I have talked about before, it's a sitcom on Apple TV Plus by the guys who made Always Sunny in Philadelphia, who still make Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Mythic Quest is a show about a computer company, actually a video game company. They make a massively multiplayer online role playing game called Mythic Quest. It's just a funny workplace comedy. It's very
okay, now I got a question for you.
I'm sorry. It's got a new episode. It's coming back. Second season starts in 2 weeks. There's a special episode, new dropping today on Apple TV Plus. So if you have Apple TV Plus, go watch the new episode of Mythic Quest.
All right, now my question. I was also recommended and got about 20 minutes into it and said, not for me. The Boys. And I don't even get the premise of The Boys. I just thought, nah, this is not a superhero thing. What'd you think?
Well, The Boys is a parody of superhero movies and TV shows. I mean, The Boys is a very dark look at what it would be like for superheroes to be real in the real world. So it is not for the faint of heart. The Superman character is is essentially a crazy fascist going around murdering people, and all of the other characters.
I got as far. The Aquamarine guy is a sexual Me Too walking nightmare. I said, I don't need any of this. But then I saw HBO run an ad for superheroes in Victorian garb. I thought, well, that's an interesting combination of two genres.
Yeah, that's The Nevers, which was created by Joss Whedon. Speaking of walking Me Too cases, that was created by Joss Whedon. And is on HBO now. I believe the first episode premiered last week. I have not watched that yet. I'm trying to decide if I want to spend the time to get into it. I probably should. I'm sure.
I like Victorian stuff. I read Victorian history. I know the Victorian Prime Minister, so I will watch that. I will give it a shot at least. So I'm looking forward to hearing what they say about it across the movie aisle. Do you do streaming on Across the Movie Aisle?
We do sometimes, especially, since there's been kind of a lack of options in the movie theaters.
All right. Well, everyone go and subscribe to and comment upon Sonny Bunch and his gang at the Across the Movie Aisle. I've remembered it now, so now I want to say Across the Movie Aisle 7 times so you remember Across the Movie Aisle, as well as the interview with Hugh Hewitt, which you should subscribe to and comment on. Those are the two podcasts that you ought to listen to whenever they drop, and I drop mine more often than Sonny drops his. Across the Movie Aisle. Sonny Bunch, thank you. At Twitter, at Sonny Bunch. Time for ReliefFactor.com after the show today. Got to get in 4. Tomorrow is the long run. Hopefully Virginia will cooperate with me, but after the show today, got to get out there and do my miles before downtown for lunch. If I had a producer, we'd go out with downtown. And I would have a wonderful time tomorrow. It is Icarian, Kirkham, and Resveratrol and Omega. and back in Virginia and a little bit colder than California. No beach, only river, only the mall. I'll probably do the mall tomorrow for the long run or go up Rock Creek Parkway or something like that. The river is flooded, so a lot of my path is messed up as you head along the river near Arlington, so I might have to run the mall tomorrow. But you should be getting relieffactor.com because 150 minutes a week, according to the Brits, decreases your chance of dying from COVID dramatically. Just walk somewhere. 150 minutes a week. I'm coming right back. Tarzana Joe, our poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, is next.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
You stared down China. You put Russia back in their box. Now we have an incumbent in the White House who gives national addresses about female-shaped body armor and maternity flight suits. What do our enemies, the ones you had to deal with, what do they think of the current incumbent?
I think they're laughing at us like they've never laughed before. Our political, and you could say this, politically correct armed forces, where they're sending out documents talking about all sorts of things that shouldn't be discussed, that shouldn't even be thought about. You look at what's going on legally within the Army. I mean, I asked somebody the other day, so if a general tells a private what to do, and if the general's slightly harsh, is that acceptable? And they weren't sure how to answer the question. Do you understand? This is just crazy what's going on. I think the world is laughing at us. And they weren't laughing before. When we were in, they were not laughing, Sebastian. I'll tell you what, we didn't have this problem with Russia. We didn't have China circling Taiwan. We didn't have all of the things that are happening right now. And we have we had a very good relationship with Kim Jong-un.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Calling new Biden legislation an infrastructure plan is like calling a shark a dolphin. They both may have dorsal fins, but you mistake one for the other at your peril. Don't be fooled. Only 5% of the bill's spending would actually go for roads and bridges, what normal people think of as infrastructure. Add in items like Amtrak and broadband, and you're still only at 30% of the eye-popping total of $2.3 trillion. And you're supposed to pay for all of this with the biggest tax increase since 1968. Here's what's worse. The bill is actually about leftist social engineering. It would end right to work, something the left hates because it guarantees no one can be forced to join a union or pay union dues in order to hold a job. Ending it offers a rich new source of campaign contributions for Democrats. Calling a shark a dolphin doesn't make it one. I'm Carol Platt-Liebau.
Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Joined now by the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show, Tarzana Joe. Hello, Joe.
Hello, you. I'm going to apologize for my voice this morning. You know, they say in California there's two seasons, the wet season and the dry season, but there's also the allergy season, which comes about 6 weeks after the wet season. If those relief factor people could work on allergy factor, I sure would appreciate it.
I will pass that along to them because I need it too in Virginia.
All righty. All right, here we go. Throughout my long career, I've heard from all the wisest voices. In every life that's lived, there are three monumental choices. Decisions so important, it's my sure and firm belief They tell if you will have a life of happiness or grief. The first and most important is selection of a spouse. The second is your business, and the third one is your house. Years of evolution and the time it takes to make them have signaled their significance and care with which we take them. But now this ancient wisdom is extinct and counts for naught, considering the turns with which each waking hour is fraught. An inadvertent pronoun could your future make or break, the way you wear your masking or which vaccine that you take. The casual remark that labels you a woke denier when saying that you pray for someone makes you a pariah. It's fighting off demise that comes from thousands of incisions. We're simply not equipped to make so many grave decisions. Every move you make sure shouldn't seem like life or death, leaving you no time to wind your watch or catch your breath. So now that we've acknowledged this life-changing complication, how do we adjust to rid ourselves of consternation? A strategy to ease the jolts and smooth life's bumpy ride. I've thought a lot about it, but alas, I can't decide. That's Damocles Had It Good, Tarzana Joe.
Great title. But rhyming pariah with denia is a bit of a reach, Joe.
It's a risk, but you have to take the risk.
You got to go. Pariah and denia is going to be in there, my Tarzana Joe greatest stretches. It's a stretch is what we'll call it. Is business good? Is business good? Are you getting lots of commission requests?
Absolutely the busiest week of my career.
The reopening of America includes a poetry reopening. If you want to get in line, write to Joe at TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com. To consult all of his work, it's assembled at TarzanaJoe.com, including today's offering. Damocles Had It Good, am I right?
That's correct.
Tarzana Joe, thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Now, I gotta bring you up to date on news. Let me get that sweater. And I want to bring you news that the nomination of Vanita Gupta has been postponed. She is supposed to be the number 3 individual at the Department of Justice, and she's run into a complete 50 Republicans are going to vote against her. She is a complete ideologue and a little bit crazy online. Tom Cotton took to the Senate floor. Doesn't mean that she's going to lose. She might win 51-50, but they're going to need every Democrat in town, and they're all going to live with that choice because she's just not appropriate. I worked at DOJ, and the AAG is a key deal, and they should not be partisan. They oversee a lot of divisions. Tom Cotton got up on the Senate floor yesterday, gave this speech, cut 23. Cut 23, there we go. Don't tell me it's...
I spoke...
No, not Joe Biden. Not Joe Biden. We didn't want Joe...
Concerns with Ms. Gupta's nomination, though, are not limited to her extreme views on these and other topics. Ms. Gupta has made a career over the last few years on social media attacking the character and integrity of federal judges, judicial nominees, and members of the Senate. She accused 4 different jurists currently on the Supreme Court, of being liars, extremists, dangerous, or opposed to civil and human rights. She must have had a keyboard macro. She just hit a shortcut button, and it said, opposed to civil and human rights. By my count, she's leveled similarly incendiary attacks on the integrity and character of around 50 currently sitting federal judges. It could be more. I may have lost count when it got so high. I asked her about these attacks. While she said during her hearings that she regrets some of her rhetoric, she steadfastly refused to renounce these attacks on those judges. Ms. Gupta has leveled similarly caustic comments against members of this body, posting online that dozens of members of the Senate are, you guessed it, opposed to civil and human rights. She accused one of her colleagues of being a disgrace, another being a hypocrite, another failing her constituents. At one point, she commented, how many of us are done with Susan Collins' concerns? Now, I want to be clear. Disagreement with or even deep dislike of members of the Senate is not disqualifying for any position in the federal government. People are entitled to have their opinions. They're entitled to have their political views. But honestly, the Associate Attorney General of the United States must be able to effectively represent the United States in court while also working with Congress on important issues. It might be hard to represent the United States in court when you've accused dozens of federal judges of being opposed to human and civil rights, or being a disgrace or a liar. Likewise, I wonder what Senator Collins thinks about Vanita Gupta being done with her concerns.
You know, I just think when they put Tom Cotton on the Judiciary Committee, Democrats didn't see the Mack truck headed towards them. He's got a great team, and he is a master of this sort of thing. And I know John Cornyn and Ted Cruz as well. Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, Angus King, really? Someone's rolling over your colleague, your benchmate, your colleague from Maine? I just don't think so. Lots more ahead, America. Hour number 2 of the Friday edition of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Straight ahead.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
What actually is election interference? Information is power, we are told. We know that to be true. When people consume information, they make choices. Information is easily spread and also easily spread incorrectly. We've been lectured by the left on misinformation and disinformation for years, from people that run message boards on websites I can't even find, and somehow they're a threat to our republic. What if I told you that a network that is mostly in airports, but also in 90 million homes, is actually a functioning Democrat super PAC?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Well, I'll tell you, folks, and this is where secular conservatives have really not thought this thing through. When you don't have obedience to God, you have obedience to authorities. That's what the founders knew. Even an atheist conservative needs to understand that. But they don't. This has been Burbank, let's see, this has been in a challenging situation that may not be easily understood and resolved. What does that mean? This is the statement from the Burbank fascists, the little people who run Burbank, especially when you are dealing with persons who willfully disobey the law. What is it? Who set the law? Who made the law? The health authorities? You make the law? That's it? I just declare? Candid Camera, in its great days, you know, in the 70s, they had a skit. You know, what they would do is they would set people up and then have a hidden camera show their reactions. In the middle of Manhattan, on one block, they put up a sign, "Backward Walking Zone," and almost everybody walked backward. Now, by the way, I would have too, just for the record, but as a joke, because I thought this is a crack up. But if it was meant seriously, this is New York City law that you must walk backward for a block, I wouldn't have done that. This is a very divisive issue within our city. Well, that's good news. I'm happy to hear it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
The Vice President of the United States of America. Honest to goodness, this is like a skit right out of the TV show Veep. You know, bad language, but it's honestly one of the most hysterical political satires in the history of political satires. And Kamala Harris is Julia Louis-Dreyfus. What's her character's name? It's Selena Myers, right? Selena Myers, right. I think Kamala Harris is the actual character played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus in the TV series Veep. Because there's been an announcement made moments ago about Vice President Kamala Harris. You're going to think I'm making this up.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
The governor of Minnesota is named Tim Walz, and he tweeted late last night, quote, Gwen and I are praying for Dante Wright's family as our state mourns another life of a black man taken by law enforcement, end of quote. Why did the governor feel a need to refer to this man's race as black? Because the governor is buying into the narrative that the police are disproportionately, unreasonably, unfairly, unlawfully killing black people. Is there any evidence that what happened, however tragic, would have been different had this person been white?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Will the never Trump class still exist, or can we finally rid ourselves of those who say they're conservatives, Mr. President, but who really don't love this country?
Well, you'll always have rhinos, and in many ways, the Democrats beat out the rhinos. It's sometimes some of these people that within the party, when you have, and obviously the Mitt Romneys, the little Ben Sasses, the people that are Murkowski in Alaska does just a horrible job. When you have people like that, they don't seem to have. They stick together. Democrats stick together. They have horrible policy. Fortunately for the Republicans, you wouldn't have a Republican Party.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Now, James O'Keefe might be the most hated man from the American left, and that's saying something besides Donald Trump. The only issue that James O'Keefe has, the only issue, is that none of the networks cover his exposés. That no one in the mainstream power structure gives him the distribution he deserves. So that's why we're talking about it today. So now James O'Keefe will be on radio stations across the country in one of the top podcasts, and yes, on our live stream. So James O'Keefe and his team sat down with the technical director of CNN. And this video is so alarming on a variety of different levels. I'm going to let you listen to it for yourself, but the essence of the video is that the technical director for CNN admitted that their goal was to publish propaganda. I kid you not. He uses that word. And to get Trump out.
We got Trump out. I am 100% going to say it. And I 100% believe it, that if it wasn't for CNN, I don't know that Trump would have got voted out. Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying it, that's what it was, right? Trump was, I don't know, like his hand was shaking or whatever. We brought in like so many medical people to like all tell a story that like it was all speculation. But he was like neurological damage, like that he was losing it, he's unfit to, you know, whatever. We were creating a story there that we didn't know anything about. You know, that's I think that's propaganda.
That's the CNN technical director saying three things that should be the number one news story in the country.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
If you are not taking large doses of vitamin D, there's only one you're just not aware of how important it is to your immune system. The other is you're lazy, which I understand. Takes an effort to buy something, but it's pretty minimal effort. Why Dr. Fauci is not screaming vitamin D is infinitely more helpful than masks.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, candidates. Hugh Hewitt. Let me tell you a little bit about court packing. It's the most radical thing the United States could do. It destroys the Constitution, the idea of the rule of law, and it is a response of bullies to a divided country. It's an attempt to pack the court with people that will make it rule its way. I never supported the idea remotely. During any of the periods of time when the left was in charge of the court on social issues, such as during the abortion era of high abortion rights, even after Sandra Day O'Connor backtracked on the deal she struck with David Souter and Anthony Kennedy and struck down, in effect, Pennsylvania, KCV Pennsylvania, Planned Parenthood. And I never thought that the way forward was for when the Republicans had all the marbles. And they had all the marbles in as recently as 2017 and 18. Never thought that the way to address the D.C. Circuit was to unilaterally expand the number of seats there. Never thought that, now's the opportunity to expand the Supreme Court and just pack in. But it's just so absolutely reckless. Stephen Breyer, Justice Breyer, who's a liberal, classic liberal, been on this show, great guest, spoke at Harvard Law School a week ago and said this, cut number 4.
Nor should we be surprised if proposals for structural change of the court become a topic of general public concern. If the public sees judges as politicians in robes, its confidence in the courts and in the rule of law itself can only diminish, diminishing the court's power, including its power to act as a check on other branches.
That is a admonition. That is a warning about how one views the court. And if you just think they're politicians, you can go ahead and expand it. It's just another legislative body. They're not. But Democrats don't agree. Hank Johnson came on yesterday, cut number 5.
Fact is that today begins a new era in terms of the Supreme Court. It's been taken for granted for so long that the court has to be 9 people. That's like baked into our psyche. And there simply is no need to continue with a 9-person court, given the circumstances that have been expressed by all of the voices that you've heard today.
Okay, Representative Mondaire Jones of New York was next up, cut number 6.
I wish we did not have to stand here today. I wish we didn't have a far-right Supreme Court majority that is hostile to democracy itself. But here we are. And the fact is, if we want to save our democracy, we must act before it is too late by restoring balance to the Supreme Court. Our democracy faces its greatest test since Jim Crow. From the insurrection at the Capitol to the racist voter suppression being attempted all throughout the United States of America, the far right is at war with our democracy. And what I want people to understand is that this crisis did not arrive overnight. Rather, the Supreme Court has been an accomplice. In fact, the Supreme Court, specifically the Roberts Court, has been working to dismantle our democracy for years.
Not extreme
One
at all, is
decision
it?
at
That's
a time.
That's just normal talk for Democrats. Ed Markey, senator from Massachusetts, was next up, cut number 7.
As a result, we have a stilted, illegitimate 6-3 conservative majority on the court that has caused this crisis of confidence in our country. The Republicans stole 2 seats on the Supreme Court, and now it is up to us to repair that damage. Our democracy is in jeopardy today because the Supreme Court standing is sorely damaged.
He continued, Ed Markey, I love the guy from Massachusetts, never been right in his entire career, but he got this fantastic accent. Cut number 8.
And we do it by adding 4 seats to the court to create a 13-member Supreme Court. These 4 new seats, to be filled by President Biden, will reconstitute the United States Supreme Court. The bench will then rightly reflect the values of the majority of the American people on whose behalf they serve. Expanding
I want, Generalissimo, will you save 7 and 8 for me, please? Because every Democrat needs to be asked about this. And they're going to be on the spot in 2022. Just save 7 and 8, please. Just save them, because then don't. I got to get through the rest of it. But just save them, because every Democrat's going to have to comment on this. Nancy Pelosi saw the damage that had happened. She ran out real quickly, tried to put a kettle on, and put the top back on the bubbling water. Cut number 9.
Do you support Jerry Nadler's bill to expand the Supreme Court by 4 seats? And would you commit to bringing that bill to the floor?
No. I support the president's commission to study such a proposal, but frankly, I'm not. Right now, we're back. Our members, our committees are working. We're building putting together the infrastructure bill and the rest. I don't know that that's a good idea or a bad idea. I think it's an idea that should be considered. And I think the president's taking the right approach.
She thinks it should be considered. Let's put it on the floor. Discharge petition time, as I urged Steve Scalise yesterday. Time to bring a discharge petition. Get Jerry Nadler's bill onto the floor. Let's get a vote, because don't trust her. Kevin McCarthy is absolutely right. Cut number 25.
My heart goes out for all. What you find from the Democrats, they don't want to just defund the police. They want to remove all police officers. That's the new cry. But now we're finding what you just played here. They want to dismantle the Supreme Court because they're trying to dissolve the American way. Think about it. 3 co-equal branches. They have 2 branches right now. The only thing that holds them back from their socialist views going forward that are unconstitutional, like a D.C. statehood, is the Supreme Court that would stand up for the American people. So they want to pack the court to protect their power. It's all about one thing: control. And do not trust Nancy Pelosi when she says she will not move it. Remember, that's what she said about impeachment before she moved impeachment twice. We've
Point
watched
by
her
Leader
time
McCarthy,
and time again.
And the key thing to remember, this has got to be asked of every Democrat. If we had a press corps that was working in the United States, they would find every Democratic senator, say, do you agree with Ed Markey? And everybody's been talking about this for 2 years. Democrats want to pack the Supreme Court. Let's get them on the record. I got to play for you as well. Now, Joy Reid is a friend of mine. I don't like to pick on Joy, but she had a guest on yesterday, Glenn Kirshner, who said this about, Matt Gaetz is never been on this show, and I'm covering the scandal, and if he is indicted or anything comes up, he should be immediately expelled if he's indicted for the things about which it is alleged he has done. The accounts of it have already made him a repellent figure, in my view, but everyone gets their day until they're indicted. I'm not going to believe it, but nevertheless, Glenn Kirshner, I don't know who this is on with Joy yesterday, cut number 14.
So the question for Gaetz, because obviously Greenberg has to give somebody bigger than him, that would be Gaetz. Here is at least, per the reporting, the people who were on that Bahamas trip. Notice if you see somebody's name that rings a couple of times. You had at least 5 women per Politico. You had Gaetz. You had a guy named Jason Pirizzolo, the hand surgeon and GOP fundraiser, to Ron DeSantis, who apparently Gaetz wanted to turn into the Attorney General of Florida. There's Halsey Beshears, a former state legislator and former appointed official in the DeSantis administration. If you're Ron DeSantis, does this feel like it's creeping closer to you? Because these are your friends. These are your allies.
Yeah, just as Greenberg's lawyer said about Matt Gaetz when he left the courthouse the other day, he said, you know what? If I were Matt Gaetz, I don't think I'd be all that comfortable right about now. You have to believe that DeSantis, these are his boys. These are his guys, right? We've seen the pictures. We've heard the stories. You have to believe that Ron DeSantis, if he has done anything wrong, feels like things are creeping closer and closer to him.
Did you hear that? If he has done anything wrong? They're awfully close to slander per se. All right? That is slander per se. I've been teaching con law for a long time. Reckless indifference with regard to the truth. You are protected by New York Times v. Sullivan. I do not want to change New York Times v. Sullivan. New York Times v. Sullivan is my friend. But I know what its limit is, which is reckless disregard for the truth. Knowing falsehood or reckless disregard for the truth. I have not seen anything at all. That was a simple, outright drive-by on the governor of Florida. And Joy's just got to watch her guests. If a guest of mine says something about a Democrat like that, they're off. They're never coming back. They're out. They are never coming back. And there's a very good reason for that, which is I like my show free of liability for per se libel. Because you accuse someone of intimacy with underage girls at wild orgies. They say, well, they might be involved. Maybe, I haven't seen anything yet, but they might be involved. That is so close to per se slander. It might be per se slander. I haven't looked at it recently. I don't know who that guy is, but Joy, don't have him back. I'll be right back, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Huniverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.huniverse.com.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Here we go.
Breaking now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
Vice President Kamala Harris will travel to Guatemala and Mexico in her role in tackling the root causes of the migration crisis we're facing at our southern border. I'm not kidding you. Kamala Harris made an announcement. She was asked by reporters at a roundtable discussion about whether she's going to visit the border itself. She didn't answer. Then she said her job is to focus on the root cause of the migration problem and that she will be traveling to Mexico and Guatemala soon. She will be involved, according to the White House, in high-level diplomatic work. Yeah, it's diplomatic work, all right. She's going to go to Guadalajara to try to deal with our immigration problem. Great. We're in great hands. Senator John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, had a suggestion about infrastructure, since we're paying just pennies on the dollar for infrastructure. He had a kind of a novel idea. Senator Thune has a suggestion about how we can spend some of that infrastructure money.
And now they've got this humanitarian crisis, national security crisis down there, which is desperately in need of a solution. One of the things they could do, there's been a lot of talk about infrastructure. The administration is talking about infrastructure bill. One important piece of infrastructure is to finish building the border wall.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Al is in Richmond, California. Al, you're on The Larry Elder Show. Thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it.
My theory is that my thought pattern is don't let an officer be the arresting officer, the judge, the jury, and the executioner. It's unfortunate. I've had these talks with young men before, and don't let that happen to you. And in reality, you don't have to follow a directive from a cop if you don't feel safe.
Oh, yes, you do. Give me an example. Give me an example of when you don't feel safe and you can refuse an order, a lawful order from an officer.
Okay. First of all, they don't order. They give you a directive. If I'm sitting in my car and I haven't done anything,
semantics, Al. Semantics.
No, it's not semantics. If I feel safe in my car, the cop is rude, I don't want to confront this guy. Give me a supervisor.
If a cop has a justifiable reason to stop you and probable cause to ask you certain questions, you do not have a right to refuse.
Well, how do you know it's a lawful order?
You see, Al, your attitude is exactly why these black kids are doing what they're doing. Here you are, a grown man who knows better. I'm sorry, we're not going to talk over each other. Here you are, a grown man who knows better, telling people, well, unless you feel you haven't done anything wrong, you don't have to listen to him. What do you mean if you feel you haven't done anything wrong? Officer pulls you over. You can say, officer, what have I done? It depends on the policy of the department as to whether or not the officer is going to respond to you. But you do not have a right to demand these kinds of things. You don't. And this is why people are getting killed. Tell young people to comply. Sort out any other thing on the other end of it. You feel that that the order has been unlawful, deal with it later on.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. It's Friday. I'm going downtown for lunch and to meet some friends today. Leaving my Virginia lean-to, leaky as it might be. The sun is out today in Virginia. I'm a little blurry, though. This rarely happens to me when I stop reading a book and go to sleep. And then one of the reasons that Fetching Mrs. Hewitt objects greatly when I do that. But rarely, and then I wake up and I say, you know what, I'm going to read more of that book. And it's not to put me to sleep. Fetching Mrs. Hewitt keeps the endless biography of Alexander Hamilton next to her bed because her side of the bed, because it's a sure way to go back to sleep is to read a couple of pages of Ron Chernow in the middle of the night. Now, she just finished, like I did, Grant on tape. And so we love Ron Chernow, but if you read that in the middle of the night, you're better than any kind of sleep aid you can take is Ron Chernow in the middle of the night. But I made the mistake. I picked up Joby Warwick's Red Line yesterday. I mean, I haven't got the interview scheduled yet. I just do not have the interview scheduled yet. And so he will be back. Joby has been on before when he wrote Black Flags and The Triple Agent. And both books were amazing books. One about ISIS, one about Afghanistan and the CIA's tragic loss of life there. But now he has come out with Red Line. Now, Black Flags won the Pulitzer Prize, and it deserved to. Sometimes Pulitzers are crazy, but this one won. Now Joby has come out with Red Line, which I'm holding here in my hand, and as you can see, the annotations are quite extensive in the book. I always, my books are unusable by anybody else. We're going to have to find French New Age composer Jean-Michel Jarre. Jean-Michel Jarre, Jarre, because the CIA had an asset inside of Assad's chemical weapons industry for many years who told us a lot about what the evil dictator was doing. And this book is about what happens when you hesitate if you're the president of the United States. You got an evil dictator using sarin gas on his own people, and he had drawn a red line in the sand, then he hesitated, and I just want to know what happens. And I had left off where a chemical attack was unfolding on the suburbs of Damascus. I mean, Assad is throwing sarin gas at his own people about 30 miles, 20 miles from downtown, from the presidential palace. It's simply crazy. And we know all about it. At the time, we just saw the people dying on the front lines. And I remember having at the last Nixon seminar, which is available on tape with Peter Thiel over at Nixon Foundation. Just go to nixonseminar.com. The most watched thing we've ever done at the library is the Nixon seminar with Peter Thiel. It's been watched and watched and watched and watched. His comments on cryptocurrency. But one of the things that he talks about is how O'Brien steps in and says, the information war occurs around every crisis. And I pause, and I'm the moderator. And wait a minute, what are you talking about? He said, well, as soon as a crisis occurs, the bad guys flood the zone with false narrative. And we're not talking the New York Times fake news or CNN fake news or anything like that. We're talking about manufactured propaganda to confuse and disrupt an orderly global response to a terrible war crime. And the Russians did that when Assad bombed his own people with sarin. They flooded the zone with, looks to us like it's the bad guys, looks to us like it's the insurgents, because the Russians have got a deep investment in their warm water port in Syria, as Joby explains in Red Line. And so Obama froze. Deer in the headlights moment. Ben Rhodes, of course, whispering in his ear, dare we do anything to upset the Iranians? We can't upset the Iranians. The Iranians are on the side of Assad. We need that deal. That deal is history. That deal is history. And so they just freeze. They don't do anything. Tony Blinken, by the way, is the Deputy National Security Advisor at the time that they do nothing. This book is not going to be well received in Obama land, but Joby's just a reporter. I mean, I'm sure he'll bang on Trump by the end of this thing, too, when I get to the end of it. He's not Democrat or Republican. He's just a hell of a reporter. And there are amazing heroes in Syria among the Syrian people. There are amazing people among the relief workers and the doctor. It's just a riveting book, Red Line by Joby Warwick. Go out and get it. When I come back, Senator Rick Scott is here. I'm going to talk to him about court packing, about stepped-up basis, about a lot of stuff. Stay tuned, America.
Don't forget to sign up for the Huniverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.huniverse.com.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
And how hard was it for 3 vaccines to be created in less than a calendar year? Could you give us some of the inside story? How hard was it to get the U.S. government with the corporations to create that historic success?
Well, it was very hard. We had an FDA that takes a long time to approve things, as you know. You had Fauci saying it's going to take 3 years, maybe much longer. Most people thought you couldn't do it in 5 years. Most people thought you'd never even get a vaccine. I felt confident. And we did something else. We spent billions of dollars on manufacturing the vaccine before we even knew if it was going to work. It was a calculated risk. And if we didn't do that, you wouldn't have had it for 9 months after the date that they announced, which, as you know, because of what I did with drug prices, with the favored nations clause, that's going to be the biggest thing ever, assuming Biden keeps it, for drug prices. The drug companies aren't exactly in love with me, and they announced it 2 days after. I think everyone knew we were right there, but they announced it 2 days after. Now, supposing they announced it before, though, Sebastian, the press would have played it down. So if they announced it before, they would have acted like no big deal. When they announced it after, they made a big deal out of it. But between the FDA, who we pushed at a level that they've never been pushed before. So we got the vaccine done in less than 9 months, and it would have taken 3 to 5 years. I don't think they ever would have had it.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
And so while their TV network ratings are cratering, their web traffic remains rather substantial. Therefore, this revelation is not insignificant. And guess what? This guy's the technical director. This guy oversees a lot of the digital operations. In Cut 50, James O'Keefe describes to Sean Hannity what Project Veritas has released. I've never seen James O'Keefe wear a tie. It's really interesting. Good for him. Play tape.
You saw the tapes. He's admitting the network is propaganda. He says they were trying to get Trump out without admitting that's what they were doing. You saw me confront him about that. I just want them to be honest. He's not being honest. They're deceiving. And he says that they're helping Biden. They're painting Biden in order to help him with his aviator shades. So this is an extraordinary admission. It's the #2 trending story globally on Twitter, which is ironic because Jack Dorsey banned Project Veritas from Twitter, yet our stories trend on Twitter. That means the truth is getting out there no matter what.
And so CNN is the 85th most trafficked. It is Alexa. I was right. Website in global internet engagement, most trafficked site. And our 240, and Alexa, I'm sorry, Fox, I'm getting so much information here. Fox is 246. Is that right? Am I reading that right, Connor? So CNN is a top 100 website. So don't underestimate the value of CNN. The cable network is a waste of time. No one watches that. It's a very unserious network. Their digital dominance is a very real thing. It is. Therefore, what James O'Keefe is revealing needs to be taken seriously. So my point is, look at CNN more holistically outside of just Jake Tapper and Wolf Blitzer and Fredo. That's not the entirety of their influence.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
Burbank is a particularly despicably run city. Their commitment to freedom is an embarrassment. They're the ones I condemned years ago, as I explained earlier. You can't smoke a cigar in a cigar shop in Burbank. Health über alles. It is a form of health fascism, which I've said health über alles, right? Health above all. Power to the restaurant was shut off March 13th after the city received permission from an LA County Superior Court judge to do so. The judges are, see, it doesn't matter. There's no recourse. Nobody values freedom. They only value what the health authorities say. It's an amazing thing. These people go to college and graduate school and then question nothing. Oh, the health authorities. That's it. That's all you have to say, health authorities. How about if I think I'll die, I won't go into Tin Horn Flats? How's that? Why is that not an option? Oh, because then I'll give it to others. Well, then you can't have anything. No place can be open, which is what they wanted and did. Dr. Fauci can't explain why the Texas numbers are not going up. Remember, he warned against that. Texas opened up. Gee, they're not.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now by United States Senator Rick Scott of the great state of Florida. He's chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Always welcome him. Good morning, Senator. How are you?
Good morning, buddy. Joe Biden's going to elect all of us. I mean, he's going to give us the greatest 22 ever if he just keeps it up.
He and Ed Markey. I want to start with Ed Markey. Your colleague went out and called for Biden getting 4 picks to the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court is reactionary and broken. Can we get every Democrat on the record about Ed Markey's radical proposal?
Oh, it'll be pretty easy. I mean, whatever Chuck Schumer tells them to do, I mean, the Senate Democrats, all they do is, Chuck, what do you want us to do? We'll vote that way. I mean, look at the issues. These Democrat senators don't represent their state. Warnock clearly doesn't represent Georgia, and Hassan doesn't represent New Hampshire, and Cortez Masto and Bennett and Kelly, they don't represent their states. They represent New York. Oh, that's right. They vote to give more money to New York against their own state's best interest.
Well, I would like to see a list of how much money each city got, because Atlanta sure got screwed by Raphael Warnock, and I don't know what happened in New Hampshire. Quick update on that. Is Governor Sununu going to run against Maggie Hassan?
I hope so. The public stuff he said, he's not against it. And you look at the polls, Hassan's not doing well. So here's what I think. I think we're going to pick up Georgia against Warnock, doesn't represent the state. Kelly in Arizona. I think Cortez Masto is going to lose in Nevada. I think Hassan was going to lose in New Hampshire. I think we can beat Bennett. I mean, what's going to happen, I think, is people look at the Biden agenda. They say, wait a minute. We've got to change this. This is going to be like 2010, 2012, 2014, where we pick up seats because of Obama's agenda. Now, what I talk about every day is, do we want open borders? No. Do we want to shut down our schools? No. Do we want men playing in women's sports? No. Do we want to shut down the Keystone Pipeline? No. Do we want voter ID? Yes. And the Democrats are on the opposite side of all those issues, and I'm going to make sure every American knows about it.
I'm also wondering whether or not Senator Hassan and Senator Kelly are going to vote for the nominee for Associate Attorney General Gupta, who is as radical as they come. I mean, is Hassan and Kelly going to actually vote for Gupta?
Oh, of course they are, because Chuck Schumer tells them to. They don't have any independent thought there. It's just whatever Chuck Schumer tells them to do, that's what they do. I mean, Kelly in Arizona voted 3 times this year against border security in Arizona. Hassan voted against opening schools. Hassan voted for men playing in women's sports. They don't represent their states anymore. So if he says, oh, you got to vote for this nominee, they're going to say, oh, absolutely, Mr. Schumer, we'll do whatever you want. Forget our states. We don't represent our states anymore. We represent New York.
Now, we saw Nancy Pelosi come out and try and staunch the bleeding on court packing yesterday, which is why the Ed Markey tape matters to me a lot, Senator Scott. Is there any way to force a vote on court packing? Because I don't think Schumer will let that come to the floor. He's not stupid. He might be left-wing and radical, but he's not stupid. And America is revolted by the idea of touching the Supreme Court. I want to get Hassan. I want to get Kelly and Senator Warnock and Senator Cortez. I want them all on the record. Can you get a vote somehow?
Well, when they try to do, when they try to do another reconciliation, which looks like they're going to try 2 more times, maybe with their infrastructure and their tax increase bill, then we'll have the ability to make them vote on anything. So that's when you have that, it's vote-a-rama. We can make the Democrats vote on anything and everything. I mean, they voted affirmatively. We got to give those stimulus checks to those murderers, pedophiles, and rapists. They did it. I mean, you can't make this stuff up how they're voting because it doesn't represent their states. It doesn't represent this country.
Now, let me ask you about Bennett and Cortez Masto. You can't beat somebody, no matter how radical they are, unless you've got somebody who's a good candidate. Who do you got in the Centennial State of Colorado and down in the Silver State of Nevada? Who do you got?
We're having lots of conversations with people. What's happening is more and more people are saying, hey, I think I might get in because I see how bad this agenda is. So I think what's going to happen is as this year goes on, we're going to see more people. I'm having a lot of conversations with people. I know the state parties are having a lot of conversation with people in those states and other states. But I think what you're going to see is all across this country, in all 34 states where we have senators up, Republicans are going to show up because they're going to say, hey, I've got a shot. Even in a state that appears to be, more further to the left than to the right. So I think we're going to see a lot of good people.
I don't endorse in primary, Senator, but I do point out weaknesses. And I think, well, I want to talk to you about Eric Greitens and Rory McCrory. Governor McCrory lost the last time when he ran for re-election, when every other person on the GOP side of the ticket won, and I think Eric Greitens is scandal-plagued and is the only Republican in the hunt who can lose that race is Eric Greitens. Will you talk to them? Is this something you share with them, even if you do it privately?
Well, I tell people where they are. I tell people what they have to do to win, and I tell people what their weaknesses are. It's part of what I do. But look, my experience is the voters are pretty smart. The voters in those states say, look, I want to win, and they're going to pick candidates that can win the general election. I mean, if you have to remember, when I got in back in 2010, every Republican in the country had endorsed my opponent, but the voters said, wait, we want a business guy that has common sense, that wants to go change the direction of the state. I think the same thing is going to happen. We're going to hopefully have when we have open seats, we're going to have good primaries, and I think we're going to get good candidates.
Let's take a look at Georgia. I asked Karl Rove about Georgia the other day, and he loves Herschel Walker, but he said Herschel Walker is a Texan. And I've heard people say Doug Collins is the best nominee for that. Do you have an opinion on that? Is Herschel living in Texas a problem to his returning to Georgia, and do you have any notice from him of what he's going to do?
So if Herschel decides to run, he's got a lot of ties. He spends a lot of time in Georgia. My understanding, he still has a house in Georgia. And I think he would be a very good candidate. He really cares about this country, and he believes the way we believe. I think Doug Collins is also a very good candidate. He clearly is a hard worker, and he's a committed conservative. I think we're going to end up with a good primary. We've got other people that are going to get in, I think. And I've talked to quite a few people that are at least talking about it. In the end, you'll see there's a lot of House members all across the country that are talking about getting in these seats, but they're not all going to get in. But I think we're going to have good, where we have open seats, we're going to have good primaries.
No, I think I'm going to move back to Ohio and run in Ohio since there are 1,000 candidates. It's like the California recall. There are a lot. I mean, I've had 4 of them on already, and I think I got 4 more to go. What do you do in a situation like that? Well, you've got 4 great candidates already, and I mean that, with J.D. Vance and Steve Stivers and Jane Timken and Josh Mandel. I got no beef with any of them. They're all been on the show, and if more of them get in, the merrier. But honestly, I think I'll go back and win with 8% of the vote. Tim Ryan is going to be a good candidate. I know Tim. Tim and I went to the same high school. He's a friend of mine. He's wrong, but he's not rotten. He's going to be a good candidate. How do you stop a knife fight from bleeding the Republicans dry there?
Well, I think here's what's going to happen. I think ultimately it's going to be about the Biden agenda. And so while the primaries might be heated and tough, I think what's going to happen is there's going to be such angst against the Biden agenda. What my job is every day, and we do it every day. We don't waste a day. Every day we define who the Democrats are. And so every day we're talking about the border. Every day we're talking about schools. Every day we're talking about how the Democrats are voting. So what we're doing is everything that happens over on the Senate floor, we're making sure that people are talking about it in their states. We have 7 people over at the National Republican Central Committee, and what they're doing is explaining, like for Ohio and Cleveland and in Columbus, hey, this is how these people are. This is how they're voting over in Ryan's case in the House. But we're telling people how they're voting every day and what their actions are, because ultimately that's what it's going to be about. It's not going to be personality. It's going to be about politics. About policy.
But, Tim is not going to vote for that crazy court packing thing. He just won't, unless we get a discharge petition. He's just not dumb.
They can't lose. They can't lose, 3 votes? They can only lose 3 votes. So there's going to be a lot of pressure if they take the vote in the House for Tim and everybody else to vote exactly the way Pelosi tells them to. And, she's a bully just like Schumer is.
Okay, well, talk to me about a very practical matter. I hope you don't have to break his kneecaps, but I hope you persuade Doug Ducey to run against Mark Kelly. But they have that August primary, which is a nightmare. An August primary also exists in, I think, one of the other competitive states. Missouri is an August primary. And that means you bleed money all summer long. Can you get they're red legislatures, can you get them to move their primary to a normal thing like June or May?
We have it in Florida the same way. After I won mine in 2010, the primary, it was a really hard primary. We only had 9 weeks to the general, so those are hard. I don't think they're gonna move them. Matter of fact, I think some states are gonna, because of redistricting, are gonna push them a little bit later. So it's just, but I think that's a problem. But I think that this is going to be about the Biden agenda, and it's going to be so bad. The country. Look at the inflation. The country's not doing great right now. Look at inflation. Look at the CPI. It's already up 2.6%. If you take the first quarter annualized, much higher. You look at gas prices are up, food prices are up, housing prices have skyrocketed. The Biden agenda of spending money like crazy, and the Federal Reserve, continuing to buy up all the treasuries, is not working. And I think the average person is going to say, wait, that's not what I voted for in 2020, and they're doing stuff that I don't believe in. So I think that's what the election is going to be about. And the primaries, it would be nice if they were earlier, but reality is it's going to be about their policy, and I'm going to make sure everybody knows the Democrats' policies.
Last question, Senator Scott. Alfredo Ortiz of the Job Creators Network, a friend of mine, we were talking this week about stepped-up basis. And I hate stepped-up basis because it destroys the 7-Eleven owner who has spent his life, it destroys family farms, it destroys family businesses left and right, from car washes to tree farms. It just is a destructive. And Alfredo said, don't call it stepped-up basis, call it a success tax, because that's why the Job Creators Network hates it. Are you going out after stepped-up basis? Call it a success tax. Absolutely. If you want, call it good. Yeah. Good.
Yeah. So here's the deal. They remember Joe Biden's big lie. He's had so many big lies so far, but one of them is, he says, I'm not going to raise taxes on anybody that makes less than $400,000. Well, by the way, he already did. And the so-called COVID bill, which was not COVID, they raised taxes on all the gig workers, the Uber drivers, the DoorDash, and all that. You look at their latest bill. Everybody's getting your taxes raised, basically, or they're going to kill your jobs by impacting our businesses. So yeah, we're talking about the taxes, but what they're doing is they're throwing out a whole bunch of trial balloons to see, which ones are they going to complain about the most? Okay, so we won't do those. So this is just an unbelievable power grab, raise your tax, big government, more debt spending by the Democrat Party.
Rick Scott, always a pleasure, Senator. Keep coming back monthly. Give us updates. Go out there and recruit. Go out there and deter. Go out there and encourage and raise money at nrsc.org. Thank you, Senator. Time for me to tell you about ReliefFactor.com. I always do it this hour. Got to make sure it's in front of the camera. Ben moves the camera around on me. ReliefFactor.com, great sponsor of the show, and also a great sponsor of my run after the show today. Only for today. Tomorrow's the long day. I'm hoping for some non-wet weather. I used to run in all sorts of weathers because it's important for you. I used to walk in all sorts of weather and put on coats and carry slickers and wear the waterproof stuff. Yeah, I just don't do that anymore. I look outside if it's raining. I say, you know what, I'll go further tomorrow. And that's not smart. But as long as you get 150 minutes a week in, you are doing what you need. And if you got the minor aches and pains that come with that, that's where Relief Factor comes in. It's not going to undo a sprained ankle, but it's going to make your back feel a lot better, your aching knees if you're a little bit older, or your shoulder, or whatever it is that ails you. If it hurts, if it's inflammation related, you got to try relieffactor.com. Put down the ibuprofen. Put away all the other over-the-counter meds. Just give it a try. $19.95, 3-week starter pack. Decide for yourself. Relieffactor.com. Coming right back, America. Don't go anywhere. It is The Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of The Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
This is Carol Platt-Liebau for townhall.com. Calling new Biden legislation an infrastructure plan is like calling a shark a dolphin. They both may have dorsal fins, but you mistake one for the other at your peril. Don't be fooled. Only 5% of the bill's spending would actually go for roads and bridges, what normal people think of as infrastructure. Add in items like Amtrak and broadband, and you're still only at 30% of the eye-popping total of $2.3 trillion. And you're supposed to pay for all of this with the biggest tax increase since 1968. Here's what's worse. The bill is actually about leftist social engineering. It would end right to work, something the left hates because it guarantees no one can be forced to join a union or pay union dues in order to hold a job. Ending it offers a rich new source of campaign contributions for Democrats. Calling a shark a dolphin doesn't make it one. I'm Carol Platt.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
What actually is election interference? Information is power, we are told. We know that to be true. When people consume information, they make choices. Information is easily spread and also easily spread incorrectly. We've been lectured by the left on misinformation and disinformation for years, from people that run message boards on websites I can't even find, and somehow they're a threat to our republic. What if I told you that a network that is mostly in airports, but also in 90 million homes, is actually a functioning Democrat super PAC?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Well, I'll tell you, folks, and this is where secular conservatives have really not thought this thing through. When you don't have obedience to God, you have obedience to authorities. That's what the founders knew. Even an atheist conservative needs to understand that. But they don't. This has been Burbank, let's see, this has been in a challenging situation that may not be easily understood and resolved. What does that mean? This is the statement from the Burbank fascists, the little people who run Burbank, especially when you are dealing with persons who willfully disobey the law. What is it? Who set the law? Who made the law? The health authorities? You make the law? That's it? I just declare? Candid Camera, in its great days, you know, in the 70s, they had a skit. You know, what they would do is they would set people up and then have a hidden camera show their reactions. In the middle of Manhattan, on one block, they put up a sign, "Backward Walking Zone." And almost everybody walked backward. Now, by the way, I would have too.
Welcome back, America. 1-800-520-1234. If you are a victim of opioid addiction, I want you to listen to this. And if you know someone who is, I want you to listen. This is in today's New York Times by Sean McCreish. It's really quite something. I've tweeted it out. Now, my Twitter feed is Hugh Hewitt. You can watch the show live on Views and News. And the Hugh Hewitt podcast come in two variety. The Hugh Hewitt Show podcast, which is highly concentrated Hugh. It's just the best of it every show. Once a day we put up, 40, 50, 60 minutes. And then there's the interview. And the interview is 2/3 new and 1/3 of the best hits of 30 years of broadcasting. Vin Scully and me. It doesn't get any better than Vin Scully and me. But yesterday's conversation with Karen Tumulty goes up today. Wednesday's conversation with Admiral Bill McRaven went up 2 days ago. And you have to subscribe to the interview or the Hugh Hewitt Show, highly concentrated Hugh, over at iTunes or Spotify or at the Salem Podcast Network, and leave a comment. I'd love for you to do that. But I want you to go and find the Sean McCreesh piece in the New York Times today. I'd almost lost my capacity to be shocked by drug overdose. Sean McCreesh is 28 years old. I'm of Generation Opioid. Wow, that's harsh. During high school, prescription pills were easy to abuse as a learner permit. Our reunions took place coffin-side and often. Our reunions now take place coffin-side and often. But shock is what I felt when I got the call 3 days before Thanksgiving that David was dead. He was found slumped against a tree in the neighborhood where we grew up, where both of our mothers still live. Technically, David was my earliest friend. We called each other cousins because our mothers are like sisters. I refer to his as Aunt Tammy. Like many people in the suburb just north of Philadelphia, he became saddled with addiction when we were teenagers and then spent his short adulthood fighting it. Clean for almost 2 years with a good job as a lead install technician at an HVAC company, married with 2 little sons, he seemed to be winning the fight. A few months before his death, I went home to write about what it was like to grow up in a society awash in prescription drugs. I thought I had enough distance to look back and freeze frame the blur of our high school years. But I knew I couldn't do it justice without talking to David. He had more charity about this catastrophe than anyone else. The article was published, and then he died. Now all I have left of him, apart from some ashes, are the pages of notes in which he talked to me about the very thing that would soon kill him. Everybody was dabbling in high school, he reminded me in that conversation. It was fun, readily available. It was expensive, but everybody would put their money together and it became a social thing. But in the end, it was an isolated addiction. You cross the line and you never know when or where it is. It's cunning and it's baffling. And once you're over the line, it's a battle between you and you. You have to defeat yourself if you want to get out of it and not die. It's almost good versus evil in your brain. In a period of sobriety, David got married 4 years ago. His first son was born. More than anything else, it was fatherhood that compelled him to get and stay sober. But there were slip-ups. It's ongoing, and at any second I can go back, he said. After David's body was discovered, Aunt Tammy's house became packed with mourners. 5 of the women standing around the tiny kitchen that night had lost a child this way. Nobody was much concerned about COVID distancing. That crisis feels intangible compared with the durable and familiar opioid crisis. I can't tell you how many funerals I've been to since Carly died, said one of the women, Renee White. It's hideous. Carly, your daughter, went to school with David and me. She was smart and artistic and a total cool girl. She died in 2013. Losing your child, you could have 1,000 people around you feel so alone, Ms. White said. Not because people don't care, it's because only you know what your child meant to you. One of the hardest parts, she said, is when somebody asks, how many kids do you have? And you don't know how to answer. By the time I graduated from high school 10 years ago, opiates were everywhere. Percocet and Vicodin became a regular presence at parties. Mixed with booze and some weed, pills were a new way to kick up a Saturday night a notch. Now, this is just news to me. Teenagers eager to get their paws on something stronger had no trouble finding OxyContin. Those pills were designed to mete out pain relief over 12 hours, but they could be crushed and snorted for immediate zombification. Addiction came quickly after. In 2010, when I was in 11th grade, Purdue Pharma tweaked OxyContin to make it uncrushable. But rather than deter my friends as push classmates already keen for the high straight to heroin. Why bother with a pesky pill that takes its time when a stamp bag of the real stuff could be had cheap? The overdoses ramped up. David named his first son, DJ, after his best friend, G.J. McGetton, another classmate of ours who overdosed. It's coming up on 5 years since DJ passed at his mother, Lori McGetton, so my grief is at a different point than Tammy's. In the addiction world, I always talk to her about how you can't cure this, you can't control this, you didn't cause this. I just find ways to honor who I know DJ really was, not what the world saw. It's probably the saddest of me. It goes on, friends. You got to go read it. And I actually think the United States has lost sight of this because of COVID. And one of the reasons why, absolutely, we cannot have bad science on vaccines and social distancing is it makes it worse for people in recovery, much harder for people in recovery who then relapse and die. I want you to go and read that and send it around. Rob Portman has been the hero in the Senate on this. Someone's got to step up and take his place. It's not a partisan issue. It is, among people under the age of 30, a pandemic of its own and devastating quality, and Americans need to do something about it and continue, as Rob Portman has been doing something about it. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
The Vice President of the United States of America. Honest to goodness, this is like a skit right out of the TV show Veep. You know, bad language, but it's honestly one of the most hysterical political satires in the history of political satires. And Kamala Harris is Julia Louis-Dreyfus. What's her character's name? It's Selena Myers, right? Selena Myers, right. I think Kamala Harris is the actual character played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus in the TV series Veep. Because there's been an announcement made moments ago about Vice President Kamala Harris. You're going to think I'm making this up.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
The governor of Minnesota is named Tim Walz, and he tweeted late last night, quote, "Gwen and I are praying for Dante Wright's family as our state mourns another life of a black man taken by law enforcement," end of quote. Why did the governor feel the need to refer to this man's race as black? Because the governor is buying into the narrative that the police are disproportionate. earlier.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Will the never Trump class still exist, or can we finally rid ourselves of those who say they're conservatives, Mr. President, but who really don't love this country?
Well, you'll always have rhinos, and in many ways, the Democrats beat out the rhinos. It's sometimes some of these people that within the party, when you have, and obviously the Mitt Romneys, the little Ben Sasses, the people that are Murkowski in Alaska does just a horrible job. When you have people like that, they don't seem to have. They stick together. Democrats stick together. They have horrible policy. Fortunately for the Republicans, you wouldn't have a Republican Party.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Charlie Kirk Show.
Now, James O'Keefe might be the most hated man from the American left, and that's saying something besides Donald Trump. The only issue that James O'Keefe has, the only issue, is that none of the networks cover his exposés. That no one in the mainstream power structure gives him the distribution he deserves. So that's why we're talking about it today. So now James O'Keefe will be on radio stations across the country in one of the top podcasts, and yes, on our live stream. So James O'Keefe and his team sat down with the technical director of CNN. And this video is so alarming on a variety of different levels. I'm going to let you listen to it for yourself, but the essence of the video is that the technical director for CNN admitted that their goal was to publish propaganda. I kid you not. He uses that word. And to get Trump out.
We got Trump out. I am 100% going to say it. And I 100% believe it, that if it wasn't for CNN, I don't know that Trump would have got voted out.
Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying it, that's what it was, right? Trump was, I don't know, like his hand was shaking or whatever like that. We brought in like so many medical people to like all tell a story that like it was all speculation. But he was like neurological damage, like that he was losing it, he's unfit to, you know, whatever. We were creating a story there that we didn't know anything about. You know, that's I think that's propaganda.
That's the CNN technical director saying three things that should be the #1 news story in the country.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
If you are not taking large doses of vitamin D, there's only one possible reason that I can think of. Two. One, you're just not aware of how important it is to your immune system. The other is you're lazy, which I understand. Takes an effort to buy something. But it's pretty minimal effort. Why Dr. Fauci is not screaming vitamin D is infinitely more helpful than masks.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. That music means it's time for the Hillsdale Dialogue, our weekly look at important things that endure. This week, Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, is our guest again, as is Dr. Kevin Slack, back from the Department of History at Hillsdale College. And they are back because we began talking about Ben Franklin last week, and we ran out of time. And boy, am I glad they're back, because Dr. Slack sent around some stuff which I had never seen before. I had never seen the Pennsylvania's Brave Men at Fires 1733 essay, Dr. Slack. And as the grandson of the fire chief of Ashtabula, who was a fireman for 50 years, I was really, that gets you a lot of purchase when you're a 6-year-old boy, when your grandpa's the fire chief of Ashtabula. That just gets you a lot of standing with the other 6-year-old boys. This is terrific. I mean, is this well known?
Hopefully it will be. I don't think it's an essay that most people. I mean, you have to understand the Franklin corpus. A lot of these essays in the Pennsylvania Gazette are, they're attributed by scholars later on, and so there's a whole scholarly literature on what the Franklin corpus is. Probably one of the great Franklin scholars was J. Leo LeMay, who has written books on what the Franklin corpus is and trying to attribute different pieces. But this is one that I think almost universally people attribute to Franklin.
Would you give a quick summary of it? I found it delightful. I'm sending it around to people. I just think it's absolutely delightful, and I had never have you laid eyes on it, Dr. Arnn? Have you read this?
Well, I read Kevin Slack, so yes. Well, to me, one of the interesting things about the essay is, and this ties into the show from last week, we usually think of Franklin in terms of commercial virtues, industry, and frugality, but we usually don't think of him in terms of being a soldier or talking about the necessity of courage to have free government. And this essay just lays it out. And so here he is talking about the need for citizens to risk their lives to put out fires, which is, of course, a great threat to cities in the colonial period. And so he's talking about the dilemma that you have. Some people show up at fires and they just want to watch. Other people show up and they're even there to loot the houses. And Franklin says what you need are these courageous firemen who are going to unify together of one mind, he says, right? He's trying to transcend the individual to put them into this community, this association. And, of course, the early fire departments or the companies, Franklin helped to establish those, as well as a fire insurance scheme later on, about 15 years later. And so what he's trying to do is praise the firemen. And this is one of the ways that you can encourage virtue in a society. If you notice in that piece, Franklin says that virtue is for its own sake, that these firemen are risking their lives because they love one another. But then you also notice, he says, virtue is, but I'm going to praise them anyway. And he's pointing out this kind of tension that exists between the things that we believe are virtuous and we do for their own sake, and yet we do kind of want a reward for them. But it's an insult to do that. And so Franklin says, I'm going to praise them here in this essay altogether. And so what he's suggesting is you need to encourage with esteem. That's a kind of currency in society. You want to encourage those virtues and reward people for dedicating themselves to the public good. Another thing I think is important, as Franklin is saying, it's the courage of firefighters, or you could translate this to police officers, those on the public watch. That's the same kind of courage that can be used for battle. And so he says these brave men of spirit, are necessary for civil society, happy government, that kind of have the idea that they are going to rule themselves, have a kind of confidence, but also can translate into defending a siege or storm. And here he's referring to the kind of courage necessary for soldiers at arms. And Franklin, of course, was a soldier later on.
I love this quote. See there a gallant man who has rescued children from the flames. Another receives in his arm a poor scorched creature escaping out of a window. Another is loaded with papers and the best furniture and secures them for the owner. What daring souls are cutting away the flaming roof to stop the fire's progress to others. How vigorously do these brave fellows hand along the water and work the engine, assist the ladder, and with what presence of mind, readiness, and clearness do these 5 men observe, advise, and direct. Here are heroes and effective men fit to compose the prime of an army and either lay or defend a siege or storm. Earlier this week, I had Admiral William McCraven on, Dr. Arnn, who's written a new book, The Hero Code. in which he says, yeah, the SEALs are a pretty good bunch. He served with them for 37 years. He's not minimizing their gallantry and bravery, but he said, you'll find a lot of heroes if you just look a little harder at regular circumstance. And then along comes Dr. Slack's package of readings, and here's Ben Franklin. What is it, 1733? Almost 300 years before Admiral McRaven is out there with the Hero Code, writing basically the Hero Code.
Well, so I'm going to disrupt this interchange and explain Kevin Slack for a minute, because it's very worth doing. So Kevin Slack is in the politics department, not the history department.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, my gosh, what an insult.
And, it's a grand thing to be in the history department, too. I actually am in both. But so he's written this book on Franklin, and the book is an achievement. I think it's the best achievement in the study of Franklin. It's called Benjamin Franklin, Natural Right and the Art of Virtue. And what he does in the book, and Kevin can correct me all he wants to, is that he attempts to explain the life of Ben Franklin in the same methodology you would use to explain the Declaration of Independence and America itself. Because there are many ways for people to live together, and there are many competing claims for what the way is to live well. The classical way to think about it is a human being is a mixture of a character and an intellect. And the character has moral and intellectual aspects. And so one of the things a human being has to do is think things through. And that doesn't just mean what the law should be like and how important the fire brigade is. That's a very telling and important thing. But also, what's the nature of things? And so Kevin reveals to me for the first time, and I think probably just about everybody, he reveals a man who's a contemplative man and also a morally serious man. And he also tracks through Franklin's life how he developed that into the ultimate man he became. And so it's one way to take another look, sort of in microcosm of one man, the ways of America, what we're like, what calling makes us have the dispositions and attitudes that we have. And so I think it's a massive thing. It's a very important book. And
now, Dr. Arnn, is it what we are like or what we were like?
Well, that's, we don't know. What we know is right now is not very good, but the telling will be in what our reaction is to right now. We might rally ourselves as we have in the past. In 1860, America was very confused about slavery, and wild readings of the Constitution abounded to justify slavery or to take it off the political agenda, and wild accounts of man appeared for the first time, which reduced the human being to the material, which is what color is, right? In other words, every wicked thing that's present today was present there and armed and getting ready to fight.
I got to tell you, yesterday I made a claim, which I'll put forward to you to be, of course, mocked or abused if it's wrong or even remotely wrong, is that the proposal put forward by House Democrats Ed Markey and others yesterday to pack the Supreme Court, to expand the court from 9 to 13, Ed Markey explicitly saying Joe Biden gets 4 new picks, is the most radical statute, I claimed, since before the Civil War. Agree or disagree?
Well, the most radical statute is also in the House right now, and that's H.R. 1. And the reason is adjusting the courts, that's a very serious thing, and taking control of them and subjecting them to political control, which is what this is about, is to undercut the independent judiciary, which is a bulwark of individual freedom.
And could strike down H.R. 1 if H.R. 1 passed.
What?
And the 9 on the courts right now could strike down H.R. 1. That's why I think striking at the court is worse than H.R. 1.
But they won't, you see, because the courts can't stand up against a political majority. They never have in America. And Hamilton predicted that they would not, and they haven't. And H.R. 1 changes the electoral system to the advantage of the party in power and the electoral system is the only way the ultimate sovereign and the ultimate interpreters of the Constitution can control it, and that's the people, the sovereign people in their constitutional majority. And so take those two things together. They're going to corrupt the regime, and they're going to cut off the one way it might be fixed in the last extremists. And that is what's going on.
That wasn't a rebuke. So I'm on thin ice, but I didn't fall through it. When we come back, I'll get back to safe ground and return to Dr. Slack and talk more about Ben Franklin and the plain truth. During the break, I'll get an update on Michigan because Larry Arnn thinks it's so well governed up there. Stay tuned, America. It's the Hillsdale Dialogue.
Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Here we go.
Breaking now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
Vice President Kamala Harris will travel to Guatemala and Mexico in her role in tackling the root causes of the migration crisis we're facing at our southern border. I'm not kidding you. Selena Myers, Kamala Harris made an announcement. She was asked by reporters at a roundtable discussion about whether she's going to visit the border itself. She didn't answer. Then she said her job is to focus on the root cause of the migration problem and that she will be traveling to Mexico and Guatemala soon. She will be involved, according to the White House, in high-level diplomatic work. Yes, diplomatic work, all right. She's going to go to Guadalajara to try to deal with our immigration problem. Great. We're in great hands. Senator John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, had a suggestion about infrastructure, since we're paying just pennies on the dollar for infrastructure. He had a kind of a novel idea. Senator Thune has a suggestion about how we can spend some of that infrastructure money.
And now they've got this humanitarian crisis, national security crisis down there, which is desperately in need of a solution. One of the things they could do, there's been a lot of talk about infrastructure. The administration is talking about infrastructure bill. One important piece of infrastructure is to finish building the border wall.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Al is in Richmond, California. Al, you're on the Larry Elder Show. Thank you so much for calling. I appreciate it.
My theory is that my thought pattern is don't let an officer be the arresting officer, the judge, the jury, and the executioner. It's unfortunate. You know, I've had these talks with young men before, and don't let that happen to you. And in reality, you don't have to follow a directive from a cop if you don't feel safe.
Oh, yes, you do. Give me an example. Give me an example of when you don't feel safe and you can refuse an order, a lawful order from an officer.
Okay. First of all, they don't order. They give you a directive. And if I'm sitting in my car and I haven't done
semantics, Al. Semantics.
No, it's not semantics. If I feel safe in my car, the cop is rude, I don't want to confront this guy. Give me a supervisor.
If a cop has a justifiable reason to stop you and probable cause to ask you certain questions, you do not have a right to refuse.
Well, how do you know it's a lawful order?
You see, Al, your attitude is exactly why these black kids are doing what they're doing. Here you are, a grown man who knows better. I'm sorry, we're not going to talk over each other. Here you are, a grown man who knows better, telling people, well, unless you feel you haven't done anything wrong, you don't have to listen to them. What do you mean if you feel you haven't done anything wrong? Officer pulls you over. You can say, officer, what have I done? It depends on the policy of the department as to whether or not the officer is going to respond to you. But you do not have a right to demand these kinds of things. You don't. And this is why people are getting killed. Tell young people to comply. Sort out any other thing on the other end of it. You feel that that the order has been unlawful, deal with it later on.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, Dr. Kevin Slack, a professor in the Department of Politics at Hillsdale. I got it right. The author of Benjamin Franklin, Natural Right and the Art of Virtue. Benjamin Franklin, Natural Right and the Art of Virtue. Together, they are doing part 2 of our Ben Franklin series in the Hillsdale Dialogues. Everything Hillsdale is available at hillsdale.edu, including applications, which are flooding into the college because people actually want to go to college and be in college. And we'll talk about that in the next segment. But this is a short segment, and we have 4 readings to get through, Dr. Slack. Can you tell us about Plain Truth, which I liked, but I didn't like it as much as Brave Men at Fires. And we were going to save the long segment for the 1754 Albany plan. So Plain Truth, please. Would you tempt our audience with it?
Well, I think this is an essay written in 1747 that Franklin writes to try to create, and does successfully create, an association for defense. And the reason that I sent you this essay is because it's a great example of social contract theory. We associate that with the founding, with the Declaration of Independence, where all individuals have certain natural rights, and they create government to protect their inalienable rights. But oftentimes it seems very abstract, except for in the Declaration and the founding. But you find examples of it, concrete examples, earlier on in the century, and one example is in Plain Truth. So there are 5 conflicts between the French and the British during this period of time, about 100 years. And the colonies often find themselves in between, right, of course, as one of these sides, being British colonies. However, in Pennsylvania, the Quakers dominated, and as pacifists, they hadn't levied funds for defending the province. And so this is a great example for social contract theory because, literally, the colonists found themselves in a state of nature.
Doctor, I must tell you, I had never thought about this before, that a bunch of Quakers are not going to be quick to arm themselves against the tribes which are on their immediate western border. I had never thought about the practical problem that having Quakers running anything presents.
Yeah, so this introduces a natural state, as it was called at the time. And what that means is that properly functioning government is broken down. And what that could be defined as is standing promulgated laws, an impartial judge, and a common executor. And so if you don't have those things, you don't really have government properly speaking. This was actually what said by James Logan, who was a friend of Franklin's in 1738. So you don't have properly functioning government. What do you do in this natural state? And you have to form associations. You unify with other people. And in this particular case, Franklin is trying to get groups that are different from each other. Talks about the British, the Germans, different religious groups to unify in the defense of liberty and property, is how he puts it. And so here we have this example of the formation of something that's extra legal, but when politics is broken down, you really don't have any other choice.
And I love in here, Ronald Reagan is known for saying, I just finished an excellent biography of Nancy Reagan by Karen Tumulty, but we know peace through strength is a Reagan term, except it's not. It's actually a Ben Franklin term. It's in here, 1747, the way to secure peace is to be prepared for war. Is he like the first one to say that, or is that Thucydides?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure it's been said many times before, but it is interesting that Franklin, who is desirous of a strong commercial regime, is also recognizing the need to have a strong defense. And, of course, that's what he does. He comes up with a way through a lottery to raise the 20,000 pounds necessary to defend the Delaware and to raise these different troops to defend the province.
So they did. They actually got the troops together.
Yes.
That's just amazing. Dr. Arnn, I wanted to tell you that in Admiral McCraven's book, the first quality he describes as courage, and the first person he quotes is Churchill. Courage is rightly esteemed the first of human qualities because it is the quality which guarantees all the rest. Is that a true quote?
Yeah, it is. That's a very important quote, and it's a very meaningful quote, but it's important to remember it doesn't mean everything.
It doesn't mean everything. It just means that Ben Franklin, when he's organizing people to go out and fight the tribes, is relying on their courage to do that. That's right. They're not mercenaries, right?
That's right.
They're citizens.
Everything. Aristotle writes that if you fear the bees buzzing around you, you will be unable to achieve a contemplative activity.
Well, there you have it. The Hillsdale Dialogue continues after this. Stay tuned.
Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
And so while their TV network ratings are cratering, their web traffic remains rather substantial. Therefore, this revelation is not insignificant. And guess what? This guy's the technical director. This guy oversees a lot of the digital operations. In Cut 50, James O'Keefe describes to Sean Hannity what Project Veritas has released. I've never seen James O'Keefe wear a tie. It's really interesting. Good for him. Play tape.
You saw the tapes. He's admitting the network is propaganda. He says they were trying to get Trump out without admitting that's what they were doing. And saw me confront him about that. I just want them to be honest. He's not being honest. They're deceiving. And he says that they're helping Biden. They're painting Biden in order to help him with his aviator shades. So this is an extraordinary admission. It's the #2 trending story globally on Twitter, which is ironic because Jack Dorsey banned Project Veritas from Twitter, yet our stories trend on Twitter. That means the truth is getting out there no matter what.
And so CNN is the 85th most trafficked, it is Alexa, I was right, website in global internet engagement, most trafficked site. And our 240, and Alexa, I'm sorry, Fox, I'm getting so much information here. Fox is 246. Is that right? Am I reading that right, Connor? So CNN is a top 100 website. So don't underestimate the value of CNN. The cable network is a waste of time. No one watches that. It's a very unserious network. Their digital dominance is a very real thing. It is. Therefore, what James O'Keefe is revealing needs to be taken seriously. So my point is look at CNN more holistically outside of just Jake Tapper and Wolf Blitzer and Fredo. That's not the entirety of their influence.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Burbank is a particularly despicably run city. Their commitment to freedom is an embarrassment. They're the ones I condemned years ago, as I explained earlier. You can't smoke a cigar in a cigar shop in Burbank. Health über alles. It is a form of health fascism, which I've said health über alles, right? Health above all. Power to the restaurant was shut off March 13th after the city received permission from an LA County Superior Court judge to do so. The judges it doesn't matter. There's no recourse. Nobody values freedom. They only value what the health authorities say. It's an amazing thing. These people go to college and graduate school and then question nothing. Oh, the health authorities. That's it. That's all you have to say, health authorities. How about if I think I'll die, I won't go into Tin Horn Flats? How's that? Why is that not an option? Oh, because then I'll give it to others. Well, then you can't have anything. No place can be open. Which is what they wanted and did. Dr. Fauci can't explain why the Texas numbers are not going up. Remember, he warned against that. Texas opened up. Gee, they're not dropping dead like flies.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
The Vice President of the United States of America. Honest to goodness, this is like a skit right out of the TV show Veep. You ever seen it? Julia Louis-Dreyfus? I'm warning you, it's definitely R-rated or PG-13. Lots of, bad language. But it's honestly one of the most hysterical political satires in the history of political satires. And Kamala Harris is Julia Louis-Dreyfus. What's her character's name? It's Selena Myers, right? Selena Myers, right. I think Kamala Harris is the actual character played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus in the TV series Veep. Because there's been an announcement made moments ago about Vice President Kamala Harris. You're going to think I'm making this up. You know how Kamala Harris was tapped as President Biden's pick to deal with the immigration crisis we're facing in America, right? You with me? They picked Kamala Harris to head up the effort. Well, people keep asking, why doesn't she go to the border? Why doesn't she, as if she is in charge of figuring out the answers to these thousands and thousands of illegals who are pouring across our southern border, why doesn't she go to the border?
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn is president of Hillsdale College. His colleague there, Dr. Kevin Slack, is in the Department of Politics, the author of a great book about Benjamin Franklin. And we're talking about Franklin today. Many of you, especially in Pittsburgh, will be under the illusion that we never we didn't begin discussing how to organize America till 1787, after the Articles of Confederation had failed rather comprehensively. But the discussion goes back far before that. Indeed, I'm looking at the 1754 Albany Plan of Union. And I'm going to ask Dr. Slack to tell us about Ben Franklin's contribution to this.
Well, before the break, we left off with the 1747 plain truth, the idea that in the breakdown of government, people need to associate with one another to protect their life, liberty, and property. Franklin also saw that what would be necessary would be union of the colonies. We've all seen that divided snake with the different colonies on it. That was Franklin's drawing. And so in 1754, and this is at the outset of the French and Indian War, the largest conflict between Britain and France in North America, Franklin proposes a plan of union that would unify the colonies. And what's interesting about it is that it's a federal form of government. And so there would be a grand council elected by the constituent colonies, so consent would be a part of this. And it would be delegated certain limited powers over specific objects. So we can see a parallel there in the Constitution later on down the road. Things like defense or Indian affairs. Yet meanwhile, each of the colonies would have their right to self-government retained through their own legislatures. So you would have these associations, and they could be added on one to another. That's how Franklin viewed the British Empire as a whole. And then you would also have an executive, an office of the president, and then he would do away entirely with the aristocratic class. And that was something that he very much sympathized with in Pennsylvania, where he loathed the proprietary form of government.
Now, he proposes this, and I want to come back to the structure in a second, but he proposes it to the British Parliament. What happened to it there? Did anyone take him seriously?
Well, Franklin's comment later on is that neither side liked it, whether it was the representatives or the leaders of the colonies or the Parliament or those in British administration. He says, on the one hand, you had too much of a democratic spirit. On the other hand, too much of an aristocratic spirit to accept Franklin's view of a federal system where you had, delegation over certain specific objects.
I
should mention that Franklin, probably wanting credit for it, much later on, I believe in the 1780s, would comment and say, if we'd only accepted my plan, things would have worked out fine.
It's the first, I did not know this until I read the Albany Plan of Union. He comes up with the term President General, but it's president. I did not know that they had quite a struggle, Dr. Arnn, did they not, at the convention over what to call the chief magistrate?
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite stories is about John Adams. He wanted to call him His Majesty, and so Hamilton and others started referring to Adams as His Rotundity.
Have you seen the HBO series with Jim Audi playing John Adams?
It's awesome. I love that thing.
Yeah,
I love that book, too.
It's a magnificent show, and he is a grand actor. But I digress, and that's dangerous. Back to the back to the plan. Is it based on population that in the Grand Council, Massachusetts gets 7 and PA gets 6 and Virginia gets 7, Dr. Slack?
Yes. So for Franklin, what you had was representation by population, and of course that was also going to affect the amount of revenue that could be raised from these different colonies.
But he did not divide the legislative power. It's not bicameral. He went the Nebraska route, unicameral, correct?
Right. And of course that was in Pennsylvania. The first legislature was unicameral before the change during the Revolutionary period. And the reason is Franklin was very much concerned about what a landed interest could do, and by this he understood aristocracy, which he often conflates with a feudal regime. So he saw how special interests could take over a legislature and actually prohibit the common good, and such as raising money for defense.
But now we're down to, and I think it's fair to say that the last bastion of conservatism in America is the United States Senate and 6 members of the Supreme Court. There is no Supreme Judicial Council provided for in the Albany Plan, and he does not have a Senate. Dr. Arnn, these are fairly fatal flaws, do you think?
Well, we don't, probably. Remember, by the time the Constitutional Convention was called, there'd been a lot more experience and a lot more thinking about how to actually form and operate a government. Because, let's say the Declaration of Independence provides the final causes of the Union. Those ideas gestated for a long time in the colonial America, and they got articulated. Thomas Jefferson was the best at bringing them to a synthesis and a consensus. But then after that, they got to figure out how we're going to do this. And they have all the thoughts that we have today. The immediate crisis tempers their view. And, what they had was a British government, remote, run by a king. They conceived the king was useful. He actually wasn't all-powerful even back then, although very powerful. And so one of the things they want is don't have a strong executive. The interesting thing about Franklin's plan is early, and he's got an executive in it, which is one of the things that cripple the Articles of Confederation.
Correct. Yep.
So he's a far-seeing man, but whether he's, because what happened? If you look at the subsequent history, it was anticipated what would happen, and that is, we'd get in these wars, and we'd need all our strength, and we'd have to unite that strength somehow. How do we do that safely without building this overwhelming central power? And by the time of the Federalists, they see that, unlike the Anti-Federalists, who didn't tend to see this, what they thought was local is best. Local can be more trusted. And what the Federalist response to that is really nothing can be more trusted in all circumstances. And so you have to have an elaborate system of setting things off and making it convenient for the powers of the federal government to unite and be exercised toward the proper purposes, and inconvenient or difficult toward improper purposes. Well, that's a wonderful scheme, and it's hard to say that I don't know what Kevin would say, but what Franklin did better than that, 40 years earlier? The Constitution is a heck of a deal, and Franklin's, I think, is better than the Articles of Confederation.
It clearly is. Now, Dr. Slack, I'm curious who William Shirley is, because he's obviously objecting to the Albany Plan, and so Franklin begins to pepper him with letters. And I'm also wondering, how in the world do these things survive? It's a very practical issue. You're a historian and biographer of Franklin and a theorist of Franklin. Did Mr. Shirley just keep his letters, or did Franklin make a copy of everything via some ingenious device?
It's interesting. These letters actually reprinted. Franklin had them reprinted in 1766, so he had kept them. Also, many of these things were circulating in various forms, some of these early writings. So Shirley very much liked, he's governor of Massachusetts, very much liked Franklin's 1751 observation on the increase of the colonies. And what Franklin had predicted is that the population of the colonies would double every 20 years. And with the very controversial suggestion that eventually the colonies would become the seat of power in the British Empire. Shirley was very much part of the siege of Louisbourg, which was the French port in 1745, where the colonies had to muster an invading force, siege the fort, and take it. And then it was simply given back to the French, which very much irritated the colonists. So Shirley had read Franklin on the colonies. He liked Franklin's writings on the colonies, but what he was suspicious of was the idea of an Albany plan that required consent, or the consent of the governed, to elect representatives to this Grand Council. And so what Franklin does, and Dr. Arnn always talks about statesmanship, Franklin was very clever. And to get to your comments on the HBO series, the way they portray Franklin is excellent there, because he's not some kind of fat, jolly oaf. Rather, Franklin is always scheming. He's always calculating. In these 3 letters to Governor Shirley that Franklin has printed much later after the Stamp Act, and he does this to show that the colonial position on consent had not changed from before the war to after the war. Franklin's first letter suggests consent is unnecessary to William Shirley. But then, in 2 other letters, he undercuts his initial position to show not just the usefulness of consent, why it's important, but then also to claim that it's a right, a legal right, and then in his own words to state that it's a right that's inseparable from the freeborn Englishmen and their liberties.
It's foreshadowing the Declaration. That's what I think it's pretty amazing that he foreshadowed the Constitution and thereafter foreshadowed the Declaration.
Yeah. And it's also, what's interesting is that Franklin is presenting these as a right, but as Dr. Arnn had mentioned, he's a thoughtful guy. And so the question is what form of government is the best government and why? And that's what Franklin is really getting to the heart of. Insofar as the end of government is protection of your natural rights, what form can best do that? And so he's making a utilitarian argument, and he's saying this is why representative government is so essential for the protection of your inalienable rights.
And Dr. Slack, would you remind us, those who didn't hear last week, how did Franklin become educated?
Well, largely self-educated.
Yes,
that's what. He loved to read.
And I want the audience to know they can do this themselves.
He did go to school, Latin school, but then wasn't a good pupil, and so was withdrawn by his father. He was quite the rebel. I should mention also that this whole battle between the colonists and Britain over representation went back 100 years. And Franklin's boyhood hero was a man named John Wise, who had resisted the Dominion of New England. So we're going back to the 1680s now, where Britain had simply revoked the colonial charters. There was no inalienable right to representation. If you were a colonist, you were not a subject of the realm of England. And so they could simply take away your popularly elected assemblies. And so they did this in the 1680s, and one of Franklin's boyhood heroes resisted this. He goes before one of the judges in Massachusetts, and there John Wise quotes all of his rights as a British subject, and the judge says, John Wise, don't think your rights follow you to the end of the earth. You have a right not to be sold for a slave. That's it. And so Franklin is around these men who embrace the Whig ideas going all the way back to his boyhood.
That is it. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the last piece that we'll have time for, which is information to those who would remove to America. So applicable to this very day about if you're going to come here, here's the deal. That's in colloquial. We'll come right back to that with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, Professor Kevin Slack, Dr. Slack, also at Hillsdale College. All things Hillsdale are found at hillsdale.edu. And all of the Hillsdale dialogues are found at hughforhillsdale.com, as well as if you hunt around on hillsdale.edu, you will find them there, and an application for the college if you actually want to get an education. Lighthorse, the Lantern of the North, I call it. Don't forget, we are sponsored by ReliefFactor.com as well. After this, I'll be out and about the Beltway, and I hope you are as well. Spring eventually comes up in Michigan, along about July. Weather turns nice up there, and if you're listening in Michigan this morning, get Relief Factor for when the winter is over, so that you're ready for July. You can go outside in July in Michigan, and you have a nice time until September. Then you have to go back indoors. But in those 2 months, relieffactor.com will allow you to enjoy the unfrozen lakes and the muddy roads and the poor infrastructure of the state up north. But relieffactor.com is good for you. $19.95 gets you started. Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back with Dr. Arnn and Dr. Slack on this week's Hillsdale Dialogue.
Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
The governor of Minnesota is named Tim Walz, and he tweeted late last night, quote, "Gwen and I are praying for Daunte Wright's family as our state mourns another life of a black man taken by law enforcement," end of quote. Why did the governor feel a need to refer to this man's race as black? Because the governor is buying into the narrative that the police are disproportionately, unreasonably, unfairly, unlawfully killing black people. Is there any evidence that what happened, however tragic, would have been different had this person been white?
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
Will the never Trump class still exist, or can we finally rid ourselves of those who say they're conservatives, Mr. President, but who really don't love this country?
Well, you'll always have rhinos, and in many ways, the Democrats beat out the rhinos. It's sometimes some of these people that within the party, when you have, and obviously the Mitt Romneys, the little Ben Sasses, the people that are Murkowski in Alaska does just a horrible job. When you have people like that, they don't seem to have. They stick together. Democrats stick together. They have horrible policy. Fortunately for the Republicans, you wouldn't have a Republican Party.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Charlie Kirk Show.
Now, James O'Keefe might be the most hated man from the American left, and that's saying something besides Donald Trump. The only issue that James O'Keefe has, the only issue, is that none of the networks cover his exposés. That no one in the mainstream power structure gives him the distribution he deserves. So that's why we're talking about it today. So now James O'Keefe will be on radio stations across the country in one of the top podcasts, and yes, on our live stream. So James O'Keefe and his team sat down with the technical director of CNN. And this video is so alarming on a variety of different levels. I'm going to let you listen to it for yourself, but the essence of the video is that the technical director for CNN admitted that their goal was to publish propaganda. I kid you not. He uses that word. And to get Trump out.
We got Trump out. I am 100% going to say it. And I 100% believe it, that if it wasn't for CNN, I don't know that Trump would have got voted out.
Our focus was to get Trump out of office, right? Without saying.
Welcome back, America. Last segment of the Radio Week is the Hillsdale Dialogue, concluding segment with Dr. Larry Arnn, Professor and Dr. Kevin Slack. Dr. Slack, you wanted especially to cover the reply to the governor, the Pennsylvania Assembly missive of August of 1755, but I especially want to cover information to those who would remove to America. So I will leave the burden on you to do both in 7 minutes.
Yeah, I think the reason I sent you the reply to the governor of 1755 is to show that Franklin was suggesting that there are certain natural rights, and he was claiming these against the claims of the governor, the proprietary party in the 1750s. But let's go to information to those who would remove to America. Franklin writes this much later in 1784. And what he's doing is he's trying to shape the immigrants who come to the new regime. Right. This is after the revolution, and he's trying to color America for those in Europe who are coming to attract the right kind of people. And even during the war, you had aristocrats who thought, because they were great men back home, and great meaning by birth and by wealth, that they would have some position of privilege here in the new regime. And Franklin's trying to discourage that. Rather, what he's trying to do is to discourage them by saying this is a great place for a, quote, happy mediocrity, for, a, quote, middling sort. And what he wants is hardworking people. And he's saying here in the United States that you are understood not so much as what you are, or the way he says it is. They don't ask who of a stranger, what is he, but what can he do? And so Franklin wants to encourage the idea of merit as based on quality, right? Your efforts and how successful that you can make yourself, as opposed to again, wealth or birth or the other things that have determined your status in the old countries.
I love that line. The almost general mediocrity of fortune that prevails in America. It's not intended to be a continental insult. It's intended to say we are a middle class. I think that's how I read it.
Yeah. And also very important here, I think, is when Franklin talks about this middling sort, it's not something that's spontaneous, that it requires real legislative insight. And so he's going to attribute it in that essay to, quote, good government, good laws, and liberty. And so you have in America a land of equal protection under the law without what he calls the patronage of great men that secures property and profits from individuals' own industry. So the laws are a crucial source of the character of the people.
Now, Dr. Arnn, I'm a wet on immigration and would basically allow everyone who is here who hasn't broken the law or come close to doing so to remain. I would build the wall so we could organize this better. But I think Franklin was an advocate for generous inward-bound allocations of spaces. In fact, it was unlimited. What do you think Franklin would say about our immigration policy today? We still remain an empty land, and we need people.
Yeah, you're such a weenie. So yeah, you just have to remember the caveat. Come here to work.
Come here to work.
Come here to respect the liberties of other people, right? Those are the criteria. And there's almost nobody in America who doesn't want a lot of immigration. One just cares about what kind. And I don't even think it's very hard to organize. I think, actually, oddly enough, Canada has got it right. Nobody wants to go to Canada. It's easy for them. But
Australia also has it right, by the way.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
very tough.
I have to reply to your slanders of Michigan trying to advertise Relief Factor. I want to recommend Relief Factor to Ohio because it's good for IQ.
I like doing that when we're going out on a break because I hope you'll forget. And then
So, yeah, the point is, there's a point system. As Tom Cotton, who sponsored the best bill on this, said to me one time, I said, explain your bill to me. And he said, well, the first thing to understand is you don't get in. You're too old. So, in other words, just somebody employable.
I wouldn't get in because I can't build anything. I often say, just let everyone who wants to come break. If they have tools, they can come in and then go to Detroit and rebuild Detroit because it's empty. It went from 2.1 million people in 1965 to under 600,000 today. That's a lot of empty buildings that have got to be repaired. You've got to bring tools with you if you're going to come to America, and then we'll homestead Detroit and other places in the country that need to be homesteaded. I think that's what Franklin wants in this letter, Dr. He wants people who will work.
That's certainly true. He wants to encourage the right kind of immigrants. I should also say, though, he was very concerned. If you go back to that 1751 observations, he was very concerned about the wrong kind of immigrants bringing the wrong kind of principles and the wrong habits. And so he was not very encouraging about the massive German immigrants who were coming to Pennsylvania. In fact, he got him into some trouble later on in the election of 1764, some of the things that he says about the German immigrants, but he thinks that they're bringing bad habits. And so his solution there is to try to encourage as much procreation as possible with the native inhabitants.
So that is the good German stock did in fact populate the upper Midwest, and most of it in Wisconsin and Indiana. I don't think they went to Michigan much. I don't know. I'll find out. Dr. Larry Arnn, Dr. Slack, thank you so much. The Hillsdale Dialogues are all at hillsdale.edu. Everything else is there. Thank you, Dwayne and Ben and Harley and Adam. Thank you all for listening. I'll be back Monday on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.